I think I fixed it. Yay. Okay. Anytime we're ready to go. Yay, I fixed it. I don't know why it decided to lose its mind, but I fixed it, so it's good. Better chat room. Hey, look at that. At least I see audio.
We're coming back in 45.
Okay, cool. Yay, sound. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys. Sorry about that. I don't know what that was. Total blitz on that in that regard. Hello. Okay, now we can start a real show. Okay, cool. Criminy.
This is Tom Hartman, and you're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT.
Okay, I got my thing sorted out because I wanted this next segment to go fairly smoothly because it might take some catching up for some people. William Barr was AG under, I think George W. Bush was the first, for H.W. Bush was the first time he was AG. I may be mistaken on that because he's been playing around the halls of conservative politics for quite some time. And he is noted previous to this. Now, when he came in, I think people knew him the least of some of the people that were being vetted and put forward. And one of the things that stands out about William Barr is his participation in the pardons related to the Iran-Contra affair. So the question I think that is important is why did people line up to support and believe William Barr? Why? Well, I think there's three reasons. One, they don't remember Iran-Contra. Two, they forgot about Iran-Contra. Or three, what's Iran-Contra? I'll explain what it is in a minute, but understand that there were 5 people convicted of felonies related to Iran-Contra. Neither one of them were George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, by the way. And in doing so, this is, I think, I forget where this is from, like articles written at the time about this, but the architect of the pardon strategy around the Iran-Contra affair during the H.W. Bush presidency was William Barr. In an oral history interview he gave in 2001, Barr said he didn't consult with the Pardon Office at his own Department of Justice, which was playing, quote, its usual role naysayers against issuing pardons. They were acting like, I don't know, they worked at a place with justice in the title, and apparently that bothered him. Instead, Barr said he spoke to, quote, some seasoned professionals at Justice. Then, based on those discussions, I went over and told the president I thought he should not only pardon Caspar Weinberger, but while he was at it, he should pardon about 5 others. This is during the Bush presidency. Now, we'll get to why in just a second, but let's just say you don't remember Iran-Contra that well. So let's do a quick refresher. Iran-Contra in a nutshell. Reagan was funding the Contras as, quote, one man's freedom fighters, another man's terrorists, was funding the Contras against the Sandinistas, a Russia-aligned left-wing government in Nicaragua. He was so panicked about the Cold War, and with decent reason at certain times. There's again, context is everything. Past being prologue, everybody knew that mainly the Cold War was just a few years where Russia and the United States punched themselves in the face just to show each other who was tougher, because ultimately, during the Cold War, called it Cold War, was a hot war. America got bombed, and so did Russia, by nuclear weapons during the Cold War. We just did it to ourselves. The amazing thing about that nuclear war, was that it was self-inflicted. So And there was a lot of ratcheted of fear. Everybody was worried about, there were several circumstances during the Cold War where accidents almost happened. And the fact that missiles were far away were part of why people, felt like we had a margin for error around things. And when things started to get close, i.e. Cuba, and in this case, Nicaragua, there was a lot of nervousness around the missiles having a shorter flight time and being harder to spot. So there you go. And oh my God, thank you, Hal Vickery and Billy in the chat room for your super chats. That's so lovely. So Iran-Contra in a nutshell. Reagan's funding the Contras because he's worried about the Sandinistas, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm not sure he's 100% wrong at just how he did it. But the public and the Congress was very concerned about the kind of weaponry they were funneling to these folks, and you'll find out why in just a moment. So they passed the Boland Amendment to stop him. The Congress said, hey, you can't do this. Line this up with any of the nonsense that Trump is trying right now that the Congress is pushing back on. The only difference being it passes and Reagan, unfortunately, is fortunately more together than Trump and therefore signs these things. But Congress passed the Boland Amendment, stopped him. Reagan kept doing it on the down low. And a lot of the ways that they got the money to get to the Contras through the CIA was through drug money and arms sales. You want to go down a rabbit hole, look up CIA drugs, Reagan selling weapons to Iran for hostages. By the way, when Trump says, this is the Iran deal, worst deal ever, this is no deal, no one would take this deal. The trading weapons to Iran for hostages might qualify. Might. And then, of course, fast forward to crack on the streets of Los Angeles. So pretty disgusting period of U.S. foreign policy, under the table warfare, drugs, and while Nancy Reagan was running the Just Say No campaign, Reagan's White House was directly, and this is according to Oliver North years after the fact, of course, lied to Congress repeatedly, wore his uniform after he'd been dishonorably discharged. Bobcat Goldthwait had one of the greatest jokes about that back in the 80s, which was, I've been fired from a lot of jobs, so you don't see me walking around in a Burger King outfit. There's an element of showmanship that was put forward when Oliver North sat before Congress. He had already been stripped, and he still wore his medals and his uniform. And curiously enough, Dick Cheney loved it. So, by the way, tied into this, George H.W. Bush kept a diary that the special counsel that had been put in place to investigate Iran-Contra wanted a copy of. And Bush didn't want to give it to him. Now, this whole thing about making recordings and keeping a diary about the illegal stuff you're doing is clearly madness. And one thing that, by the way, if Trump learned anything from these guys, he learned this. If there's one thing that Trump figured out, that was don't write anything down. Like, this is why you hear stories about Trump eating paper, and sending personal notes to world dictators on paper that is immediately destroyed. Because he learned the lesson of Watergate and Iran-Contra, by the way. So, the Minority Report, because the Democrats were in power at the time, which is why a lot of this stuff came to light, was written by at that time, a relatively minor congressman from Wyoming, a guy named Dick Cheney, and he fell all over himself trying to close down. He was the Jim Jordan of Iran-Contra. They were setting artificial time limits. He was trying to shut down the hearings. He called Oliver North the most effective and impressive witness certainly this committee has heard. And maybe he meant that version of the committee with him on it, because certainly, during Watergate, they heard some fairly impressive witnesses. P.S. Once we stopped warring with the Sandinistas, they were voted out of office naturally in 1990. And Oliver North was quoted as saying, "I'd offer the Iranians a free trip to Disneyland if we had have gotten Americans home for it." This was a constant refrain within the Reagan White House, that trading weapons for these hostages was a reasonable deal. So if you're talking about the worst Iran deal in the world, this is literally Reagan was quoted as saying, "They can impeach me if they want. Visiting days are Wednesday." They can impeach me if they want. Pausing and reflecting. And then he went, "Visiting days are on Wednesday," joking about the fact that he was committing a felony and circumventing the constitutional powers of the Congress and selling arms to to rebels against the will of the American people and the Congress, and using Koch money to do it. So William Barr, if we can go back to that original quote from him, was believed that Caspar Weinberger, Oliver North, and several others having to do with the Iran-Contra affair should be pardoned. Okay, so let's talk a second before we get to the break about why he thought they should be pardoned. Okay, so during the time that that he's working for the White House, there, the Bush White House, there was a moment where he, gathered, like I said, gathered this intel on, went to the Justice Department, said, Department of Justice said, "Hey guys, what should we do about pardoning these guys?" Well, they basically said it's not a good idea. It looks bad for the president. It's unjust. Go figure. And basically Barr's response went straight to the president and went, "Not only should you pardon Weinberger, who I was originally asking about, you should pretty much pardon everybody else." Okay, why did he say that? Why did he tell that to George H.W. Bush? It's because the independent counsel that had been put in place was seeking Bush's journal that he had kept during the 1986 campaign, which proved that he knew more about Iran-Contra. He said he hadn't at all. He was the one who lied the most egregiously about it. He without equivocation said, "I don't know anything about that." If you'll recall, Reagan's trick was, "I don't recall." He played doddering, and there's an argument for the fact after he'd been shot and he was entering primary dementia in his second term, that may have been true, but he certainly played that angle to get there. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this, and I'll tell you why William Barr specifically was picked by Donald Trump. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Get your cameos, cameo.com/Hal Sparks. So, hi, chat room. Thank you guys so much. Let's see. A couple of things. How did the Reagan White House also sell arms to Iraq and then sell arms to Iran at the same time? Also, did the Reagan White House use satellite data to help Iraq use chemical weapons? That I'm not Edward. I'm not 100% sure on the use of satellite data thing. That's one of the rumors around it. I don't know if there was ever unequivocal evidence about that. But all of it was on the down low. So did the White House sell arms to Iraq and Iran? Not directly, not the way we would think. They definitely traded weapons to Iran for hostages. And then in a way, I guess, of kind of gathering, like getting some kind of revenge on the, or what have you, you could argue that they gave weapons to Iraq to kind of zero out their commitment. Oh, and Julie's with us. She's in Sevriga. She's in Sevriga. Aren't you in Sevriga right now? Julie, wait, stay safe. Yeah, Hawk and tow missiles. That's right. How we made it to Cape Town, South Africa, putting the mega in the mega worldwide. Yes, absolutely. Julie, you are almost single-handedly holding that down. Although, anybody else in the chat room or watching, feel free to leave comments below if you're not in the United States. Tom Hebert, who's in Canada, he qualifies, certainly. That's that's all right. Weird shadow on my forehead. It's very weird. I don't know what's going on. And I'm glad you guys can hear me now. Fantastic. Don't forget to... Wait, hold on. I made something. I made a graphic. Wait 1 second. I almost forgot. Smash that like. There you go. I'm trying to make Can't Stop Lying and those guys proud of me for remembering.
I like that.
Yes. Thank you. Trying to do all my stuff properly. Which is really pretty. We'll be back right after these messages. So calm. So wonderful. So, wait, what happened? Waiting for, what's happened? What do you mean waiting for me? What happened? What the heck? I am live. Why am I not live? What did the image do with the thing? Check one. Okay. Did I go away? I'm going to reopen this page. That was weird. I think we're still. Maybe. Yeah, good. Okay.
30 seconds and you have Ike.
Oh, great. Okay. Excellent. I lost my image for a minute on the YouTube page, and I got to panic. I always have to solve these stupid problems in the middle of everything. Whew. That's fun though. The spinning thing. That's right. Smash that subscribe button. Hit the bell notification. Benny Loco coming with the complete philosophy. You are here.
This is Doris Davenport, host of The Doris Davenport Show. All local, all the time. I'm on every Saturday morning from 10 to 11, right before Hal Sparks. Now let's get back to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
We love Doris. I tried not to chime in on the whole Jussie Smollett conversation they were having at the end of the show today. Ooh, we could have gotten in a big knot about that stuff. Let's just say hinky. That's all right. So let's. I'm gonna grab a caller because we got Ike on the line, and I'm sure he wants to dive a little bit in this. And I'm sure Ike, like me, is old enough to remember Iran-contra. And the finagling,
oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I remember Watergate, brother.
Well, you're one up on me. I remember it, but I remember seeing it on my grandmother's television going, why am I not watching whatever show, like Croft Super Show? Why are they interrupting Saturday morning cartoons for this crap?
I hear you, brother.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the last president that on the Republican side that shouldn't have went to jail was Ike.
Mm-hmm.
Nixon was a tool of Prescott Bush.
Right.
People behind Reagan, one of these days, you could open up that can of worms and people would be surprised. The people behind Reagan are still here, and they're the same line that runs all the way back to overthrowing FDR.
Well, like I was saying about Dick Cheney, like he was the Jim Jordan. If you want to see your future, folks, understand that Vice President Jim Jordan is on the lips of a bunch of Republicans right now because he's a natural successor to Dick Cheney, and he's got a better heart, function-wise, not, soul-wise. But, yeah.
Right. Well, people would be surprised. But, we came close to having a bunch of businessmen get together and overthrow our government for a fascist dictatorship under FDR. So we've been down this road.
Right.
But what I was going to get into was this. Okay, let's take worst case scenario. Let's say that these judges don't do what they're supposed to do, which is uphold the laws when it concerns his taxes, or uphold any of the other laws, but particularly the one about his taxes, because that goes back to the Teapot Dome. There's a reason that law was put in place in the first place.
Yeah.
And that was to investigate and to stop corruption from a sitting president from taking bribe money and doing all kinds of illegal activities. That was the one way to check up on him and get him. If you had to, you could get him with his taxes. But let's just worst case scenario this thing all the way out.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that the Senate continues to act as a block. Let's say the judicial doesn't stand up and put the force to it that's needed to put a stop to it. Now, I know we can impeach. I know that sitting justices can be impeached on the Supreme Court or anywhere else throughout the judicial system. That's for sure.
Yep.
The question is who holds the power? If the House votes forward impeachment, is there any point where the Senate becomes the mechanism and can to protect the president? And at what point can you come up against the Senate and charge them with obstruction, or charge them with something to the point that
there's only one way to charge the Senate with there's only one way to charge the Senate with obstruction, and that's to vote them out. The reality is,
well, the other thing I was thinking about, what about an individual state by state recall of the senators? See, what I'm beginning to think
that would be a functional process. But again, by the time you're winding that up, a bunch of these guys are ripe for actual campaigning against them. That the one upside of the Trump methodology is that everyone is now forgiving of any Democrat who wanted to go ugly against their Republican if they needed to, especially if these guys were were rolling around Mar-a-Lago with the lady who ran the spas, like there's an element of that stuff's now fair game where it wasn't pre-Trump, and I don't think that was something they factored in. And I also think there's a strong enough drive in everybody else that's running right now to genuinely win. That I think everybody had a bad case of Al Gore for a while, and that's gotta you gotta fight like you need to do the job, not you want the job. There's a problem with people running for office and thinking this in terms of a trophy, or I've gotten this role, or the accolades, like becoming a governor, becoming a senator, becoming a representative is in and of itself some sort of award or some sort of point value. It has none. How you execute that job does. It obviously it has benefits, but go ahead.
I want to see these guys working 40 hours a week and maybe some overtime. I want to see subpoenas flying Monday morning. I want to see a whole lot of things. And yes, they're being too damn nice. They're showing up at a gunfight with a damn butter knife. And I'll tell you what, I'm about as sick of the Democrats as I am the Republicans. But here's the last point. I'll tell you what, if you game this thing all the way out, I used to joke about this, but I don't know that I was joking now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm beginning to hope that if it came down to it and the courts fail us and they completely trash the Constitution and they don't do their constitutional duty in the Senate,
mm-hmm.
I'm beginning to think maybe a coup isn't such a bad idea.
No. First of all, there is no I love you, man, but no way. There's no primary. No, there's no functional. Yeah, well, that's.
If they go that far, would it not be the military's duty to step into the breach?
Well, yes, but that is so far down the Venezuelan direction, and we're nowhere near that right now. We simply aren't. Okay. There are certain protective aspects of it, and there will be some laws dialed back, but absolutely not. Especially if, by comparison, if Iran-Contra was not the trigger for how that went, because again, addressing what Barr did, the reason he had these guys pardoned was because Walsh's as the special prosecutor that they put in charge, Walsh was getting close to getting to the point where he was going to the Supreme Court to request Bush's journals from the 1986 campaign that would have been the nail in the coffin. And by pardoning those 5 people, the entire case fell apart. There was nothing that that Walsh had to to manipulate the witnesses, and hold over them like, you're going to go to jail. Well, no, I'm not. I've been pardoned across the board by Bush, and that kept him from being able to get that primary piece of evidence. And the United States sailed on through George Bush being voted out of office as a one-term president. And Clinton coming in and heralding one of the the longest stretches of uninterrupted growth. If you don't count Obama digging us out of the filling the hole that Bush put us in, and making level ground a mountain. There are checks and balances that are playing themselves out, and they played themselves out similarly in Watergate. They played themselves out similarly in Iran-Contra, and there are always, fluctuations back and forth on the law, that after one of these events in American history happens, we pass, bills and amendments, and we tighten the laws around our representatives in an attempt to limit these kind of circumstances in the future, which is one of the reasons why a lot of what Trump is doing these days, and we'll talk about this when we come back after the break, is that he is creating these, I'm going to shut down the border, I'm going to ban all Muslims, and then it all falls apart in the courts. A lot of what he's running up against are limitations put on the chief executive, in some cases many decades ago, because this very thing was tried. So coup, no, absolutely not. And again, 100% zero violence tolerance in this, in our chat and our show, in our concept and in our dialogue. Period. End of story. I know it gets boring. I know I don't get the clicks and the viral videos and stuff coming from saying stuff like that, but it is factually the truth. We this is we don't punch Nazis here. We don't physically disagree with anybody that we are having a verbal disagreement with. Period. End of story. Ever. Not ever. And the same thing goes true with the testing of our constitutional strength as a republic and as a democracy. This is a new experiment still. This country is, a little over 200 years old, and nothing like this was ever tried on this scale until we came along. And even other countries are working out the kinks of how this works to be the best representative and the most honest and, the most amount of freedom you can handle within the circumstances. And what limitations are valid and what aren't. This is playing out completely here. And there are forces in this world that wish it didn't exist, period, end of story. And by failing it and letting ourselves fall into any kind of actionable, physical, violent rhetoric in any of that regard, we cede that ground to those people who say that it doesn't work. So I'm a hardliner about this stuff. Period. So anyways, we got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. We love Ike. That's the one area where he and I part ways on that. And I understand the frustration. I see it around me all the time. I see it at the marches I go to. And when I see it there, I say the exact same thing. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. We're live streaming on YouTube if you want to join us at the Hal Sparks channel. So some of us are a little more moderate than AOC, right? Lots are. And that's completely fine. No violence. Get him, right? We had almost half the Senate and House walk out during our Civil War. Constitutional democracy remained intact regardless. Exactly. Speaking of borders, one of my local news anchors is saying a shutdown ain't going to happen. Yeah, it is not. That's just goofy. He already rescinded it too. Let me see if I can get that oranges video up, because that's, oh boy. See if this will play correctly. Hold on one second. Probably.
The AI I want? Well, insurance is all about.
Bring this up and then I'll pause it.
So that this team can inform this couple that their payment will arrive faster than this guy. So whether I'm processing claims.
By the way, how you doing, chat room? You guys are awesome. Thank you guys for the super chats. Greatly appreciated, everybody. If you get a chance, become a Patreon subscriber. We're going to be doing some private streams just for the Patreon, which will be a lot of fun. I'm hoping. Hold on. To pause him on this. Yeah. Okay. Let's see if I can get this one. This is so wacky. I can't. Did you guys catch this, by the way? I mean, some of you had to have, but holy smokes.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
So, Trump, there was, okay. Some of you may have seen the brain fart he had around the word origins, wherein in 4 attempts at saying the word origins, he said oranges 3 times. He said oranges twice. Obviously was aware he was saying oranges, couldn't stop saying oranges, said some other stuff, came back, took another swing at it, managed to get the word origins out. Not 100% clear he cognitively understood that's what was happening, that he actually had said it correctly, and then said oranges again. Thank you, Michelle, for contributing to the 666 fund. I appreciate that, helping us in our attempt to buy 666 Fifth Avenue. So Trump, really they should look into the oranges of the Muller investigate, the oranges, the beginnings, when he's getting lost in that. And when he said orange, he said, when he said oranges twice, then said origin, didn't pluralize it, whatever. That didn't bother me as much. It was just a weird, I don't know if his Adderall Diet Coke mix was off. But this is from the I want to play a little bit from Trump speaking at this Republican dinner that they had. Just let's see.
Wind.
When he talked about wind.
If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You told me that one, okay? The thing makes it so... And, of course, it's like a graveyard for birds. If you love birds, you'd never want to walk under a windmill because it's a very sad, sad sight. It's like a cemetery. We put a little statue for the poor birds. It's true. In California... It's
true. When windmills... the sound of windmills gives you cancer. So, I guess Sound of Music ended a lot differently. And Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Maybe that's what was wrong with the villains in that they had windmill instigated brain cancer.
You shoot a bald eagle, they put you in jail for 5 years.
Okay, so you shoot a bald eagle, they put you in jail for 5 years. One dies flying through a windmill, nobody goes to jail. Is his argument. Therefore, it's a failure. Therefore, windmills. It is often hard. I've gone back and forth with several right wingers about climate change over time, and I guess the unfortunate fact that 98% of climate scientists agree on the climate shift that is occurring and the damage that is being done, and that a lot of it is man-made, and that you could curtail some of it if you actually set some policies in place. That doesn't seem to interest them. What interests them, seemingly, is the idea that you will, I guess, tax away the innovative power of the United States simply by trying to make companies clean up their own messages and not poison the rest of us. And I would make the argument, and have, that never argue climate change with a right-winger, because they do not have the intellectual capacity to gather the concept and make sense of it. They are confused by there being an Earth. Maybe it's the flat earthers that the influence therein. Maybe it's the sort of evangelical Christic idea put forth by some people that God cleans the air like a giant HEPA every night, and you can always count on him to fix the sky when it's broken, and that kind of stuff. And that storms, mostly like the big bad storms, and the rise in them and the rise in temperature, it has nothing to do with the amount of chlorofluorocarbons and methane and pollution, and diesel exhaust and coal plant sleuth and smoke that goes in the atmosphere. It's probably just gays. Probably that's what's doing it. You know what I mean? I mean, if you want to get scientific about it, tracing it to the black smoke coming out of a truck's exhaust pipe, that's not what's causing the spike in temperature. No. It's homosexuality and trans rights. That's what's making the lightning happen. I mean, if you really want to boil it down and get scientific, that seems to that's a more solid argument according to them. So I would make the case, in many ways, that you don't argue climate change with the right winger ever. You argue pollution with them, because that they can understand. When 100,000 kids are sent to the hospital every year with life-threatening asthma because of direct pollution from cars and industrial pollution and coal plants and the like, that's something you could probably on a relatively one-to-one basis, you could have that conversation with them. And my argument is that's all you should ever try for. Everything else, you're just spinning your wheels in the mud. The idea that they're going to grasp some sort of giant concept like climate change is a farce, and it's a waste of your breath. So argue pollution with them only. The same thing I think applies to some degree about Donald Trump, because to them, his success as an individual on a monetary level, whether he got there, legally or not, is sort of immaterial. They don't care. It is simply just something, it's indicative of success. Anybody who hates on how Donald Trump became rich is jealous, not concerned about the immorality or the illegality of his actions. You're not concerned about the fact that this guy would sell out the United States to feather his own nest. You have to go to arguments they recognize and stay there. So when it comes to Donald Trump, the idea that people could, should be able to, buy a bunch of the president's product from his business or go to his hotels or whatnot is something that conversation doesn't last very long when you have them like that. Just don't push, just don't bother pushing back. Just state it and stand by it. Because the idea that the president could up the price of his hotel rooms, when people are coming to town, and then, by the way, decry that Hillary Clinton was selling influence. I mean, the absurdity. Like Trump argument about Uranium One is one of jealousy in and of itself. But the point is, if you're going to argue about Donald Trump's success, quote unquote, they're not. You're never going to make any headway with his hardcore supporters. Never, because they envy his life no matter how he got it, and they also believe that the system is set up so perfectly against them. And by the way, this is something that, ironically, the extreme right and the extreme left make nearly the exact same argument whenever they're pushed, that the system is rigged against them. And one side might say, "Well, I'm right," and the other side's insane. Well, understand that is the actual argument that the other side makes as well. I'm really persecuted. You're crazy. You get everything you want. I get nothing. This is and Trump, like a televangelist, plays into the right-wing version of that. That they're being tormented for who they are. And so the argument has to be, when it comes to him, is why, if he is so successful, do you need to keep cleaning up his messes? Why are you lining up to wipe his backside? Why is it that he needs you to protect him from sunlight? Why are you his umbrella boy? And a lot of them, that's where I found that their conversation is kind of falls apart. This is one of the weaknesses in the armor of the Trump supporters in the world, and it is the one area where they still have some level of embarrassment or shame, it seems. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this news break. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Follow me on Instagram at Hal Sparks and on Twitter at Hal Sparks. Go to the Facebook Hal Sparks Fang page, F-A-N-G. And, of course, if you follow me on Twitter or Facebook, I'll put out the link to join us in the chat room. And I want to thank everybody for the super chats. You guys are so awesome. And our new Patreon subscribers, I'm going to announce those guys right after the break. We'll be back. Hi, chat room. There's a huge trend in evangelism to worship big business and to ally themselves with it. Agreed, yeah. Somebody needs to be his umbrella boy. I nominate the lobby boy from the Grand Budapest Hotel. Which is why Billy Hutchins, I say, if you love some AOC, then look into her early political activism without mentioning names. Right? There's no such thing as justice. Sure there is. It's more of an ideal. Just like, it's like a perfect circle. Does a perfect circle exist? Only in the ideal, but you get as close as possible to it as you can in every circumstance. Is there such a thing as karma? That's a question, and a lot of people rely on that. This concept of instant karma has been kind of ridiculous. Oh, look, and I was going to announce, and we already got another Patreon already. That's awesome. Thank you, guys. Hey, Hal, have you been hearing anything about Tesla version of an 18-wheeler? Yes, they've been working on a truck for a while. Justice is always in part aspirational. Yeah. Well, justice. I don't think Evernum is saying there is justice.
Hal, just letting you know your YouTube stream is crashed on our end here.
Oh no. Well, it seems it's fine everywhere else. I'm talking in there right now, so you might want to restart the page. That might do it. But thank you. Let me know if that works. Because we got to.
That was us. You're good.
Okay, good. They had a fundraiser for Trump in Beverly Hills last night. It was a one porn star payoff per plate dinner. You're not going to be part of the Sexy Liberal podcast by Stephanie. Why not? What's the problem between you two? I didn't. I mean, I don't have anything against being on the podcast. I think it's just for her team and her people. So anyways, he was saying that justice, karma killed the guy who almost beat me. That he's saying there is justice. There is the question whether or not that justice is tempered by compassion or if it is not. If and that's an interesting. I understand where you're going there, but I would argue that justice in and of itself must contain compassion, or it is unjust. That's the difference between justice and vengeance, for example. If that makes sense. Trump is a criminal. Agreed. I've been having short glitches, but it comes back. Okay, cool. The people deserve better. This is true. Thank you, Zelda Chick. Happy Saturday to you. She started a podcast network with other people like Bob Seska, Frangela, Randy Rhodes. Oh, I see. Gotcha. That's cool. I don't know. Maybe they'll reach out to me eventually. Who can say? I don't know. Ask, you guys will have to ask her. Ask Steph if she wants to have my show carried on there as a podcast. That'd be kind of fun. Thinking of renaming the Professional Left podcast to the Not Sexy Liberal, Not Pod Save America podcast. Right. It's the tough part. Justice is restorative if possible. That's true. If it's indeed justice, that's the thing. And I think that's the key, is that justice with, and that's, what our mitigatory law system has really focused on over time. It's why we started, arguably, in theory, with thou shalt not kill and ended up with depraved indifference and involuntary manslaughter and second-degree and third-degree murder and, first-degree murder. And, there's a reason why that is justice is becoming more compassionate and recognizing that there are variant circumstances, even in the most egregious of crimes. I did ask her how, when I did, she mentioned something about leaving you a message and you never got back. Oh, that's because she doesn't have my new phone number because my phone number got taken. So that's very funny. Well, then I will reach out to her. How the weather is finally nice in Chicago. When are you coming back? Very soon. We're going to make that happen. EO, I guarantee whatever, if you have a computer, it has the software. It has either a memo recorder, which is enough to do a podcast, or if you have a Mac, you can use GarageBand. Audition, there's a version of Audition that's free, I think. Adobe Audition. There's a lot of free voice recorder things you can do. Yes, meet up in the suburbs. Hal and Steph, we would all love to see that again. Indeed. Chicago's really pretty today. It's because we have a gay black female mayor. You do realize that's very...
20 seconds. Sorry, Hal.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. That's Cheryl P. That is a very sweet sentiment, but it is the left-wing equivalent of God sends tornadoes against gay people. These rich and powerful Republicans have been walking all over the USA and discussing.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn plus-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back to the show. So, we have been blessed with a bunch of new Patreon supporters on the show, and I wanted to thank them personally. Alejandro Hani just started, Allison Ziegler, Billy Hutchins, Brian T., Kamasha, that's all that's listed there. Carl, bless your heart, who also is one of our moderators in the chat room. Chance, Charles Herbert. I almost thought that was a relative of Tom's. Christine Ginger, of course, James Etling, JM. Some of these people are in the download. Jonathan Raymott, Johnny Stewart, Julie, bless your heart, Lisa Carper, Mark Lamont, Mary Jane Talla, who is new to the whole thing, Michelle Hebert, Miss Carrie, thank you so much. Natalie, thank you so much. Nicole Akers, Pamela Reinsko, Robert Jackson, Robert Reynolds, TKL Knitting, and Tom Hebert and Victoria Smith. Thank you guys so much for being part of our like brand new kind of currently thriving Patreon that's actually taking off, and eventually we might even be able to make enough money to give Johnny gas money so he can come down and be the show every week, instead of splitting it every other week. I wanted to thank everybody individually, and we're going to be having some Patreon only live streams that are kind of like personal interaction things. If you want to join patreon.com/HalSparks and support HSRPM and everything that we do, $5, $10, $20, whatever you want to do a month, it's super great. And at the $5 level, there's what we call the Blue Patch Club, which is all of our listeners that are our progressives and liberals out there. And you get your one of a kind blue patch that you can bring with you to live shows that I do, and it gets you a free ticket for your friend. So if you buy a ticket, you bring somebody for free if you're a member of the Blue Patch Club. So it obviously pays off very quickly. But anyway, so thank you guys so much. And now back to the show. The Trump. I gotta find the oranges. This is so very odd. Let's see if hold on, why is that the link? That's terrible. I'll find it in one of the other ones. A lot of hay has been made about Trump kind of sundowning or being just kind of, age-related difficulties, and that his diet and lack of exercise is affecting his cognitive ability. Well, here you go. This was kind of amazing.
Investigation. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation, the beginnings of that investigation. You look at the origin of the investigation, where it started, how it started, who started it, whether it's McCabe or Comey or a lot of them. Where does it...
I love when he sniffs, when he throws in whoever or a lot of them, or it could be anybody, could be a lot of people, could be a... There's always that kind of, I've run out of words, so I need an Adderall blast or something. And there's still some in my nostrils. I don't know.
How high up in the White House did it go?
Okay. One would hope, for the record, that if there were a case where a presidential candidate was, the FBI and the CIA had both come to the president and said, hey, one of the people running for president right now, who looks like he may be the nominee for the party, people in his campaign and in his monetary circles have been making lots of phone calls to money launderers and Russian operatives. Like a lot. And those same people we have caught messing around trying to hack voter rolls, and have been creating fake social media accounts and trying to create, acts of violence on the streets of America in the name of political dissent. And this particular candidate and his buddies, they're talking back, they're trying to set up back channels to these folks through people we know market, dirty money and human trafficking and all kinds of other stuff. This is concerning. We have a meter on our desk that if you call a drug dealer on his cell phone 9 times, you might just be annoying and gotten a wrong number, and you're just stubborn. That 10th time, we gotta listen because we're tapping that guy's phones. Now you've gotten into double digits as far as calling this guy. We're gonna need to listen to the conversation because we've already got a warrant for that dude, and we've got a warrant that says anybody who calls him past a certain number of times, we get to listen to them too. And Mr. President, the members of the Trump campaign are burning up Russian phone lines right now. And you might want to worry about that because it's the same Russian phone lines that are calling in social media orders to Macedonia and to the Internet Research Society.
You will all get Pulitzer Prizes, okay? You're going to all get Pulitzer Prizes. You should have looked at it a long time ago. And that's the only thing that's disappointing to me about the Mueller report. The Mueller report, I wish, covered the oranges, how it started, the beginnings of the investigation, how it started. It didn't cover that. And for some reason, none of that was discussed.
Okay, first of all, he's not supposed to have read it yet. Let's be abundantly clear. Congress hasn't seen the full report yet. Barr's not supposed to share it with the president. They're supposed to make all their decisions about that, as a completely independent body. But now Trump is asserting what's in it. Now, that could largely be him just making stuff up out of whole cloth, which he does fairly regularly. That would not be surprising if he just said he just made up this idea. Now, the reason why I started the show saying this is Trump's, I can't decide if it's his worst best week or his best worst week, is that he was on a road towards the general public believing Barr's initial summary and pushing him out into the clear. And I mean, everybody jumped on any believer, like suddenly everybody who, was speculating about what Mueller would find and talking about all the evidence in public about Donald Trump and his collusion with the Russians and his obvious footsie with them, and that and his having Roger Stone act as an intermediary to WikiLeaks, which is clearly going to come out over the course of that trial. There's been a report that the Ecuadorian embassy is going to expel Julian Assange in the next few days, and that there's a warrant on the streets of London for him the minute he steps out the door. That'll be a curious circumstance later this week. But in the course of all those, this stretch of stories, Trump should have found himself kind of on the upside of it because people were, kind of like, I'm glad it's over and they found nothing and I told you so. And people were downright giddy. Odd people, by the way. People that I find such curious, I guess it's not surprising that Jimmy Dore was happy that, that the Barr report agreed with him. That's no surprise. He lines up behind Tucker Carlson, lips out, knees down, for some odd reason, and the fact that he's never forgiven Maddow for beating Hannity in the ratings, apparently. But there should not be a surprise that that Fox jumped in. But a lot of people on Twitter, on MSNBC, even Ari Melber, his first day afterwards, was all in well, there was nothing there, and you just got to face that fact. And, you know, we all thought there'd be something, but, you know, sometimes you just got to face facts. And then, increasingly, the facts are coming out that not only is Barr's version of the report a complete PR document, a complete snow job, but he may himself be engaging in obstruction in an attempt to protect the president, which is, by the way, his one job. And his Trump's anger about how the entire thing started, how in the world did the Muller thing started? He's been tweeting about it like a madman. So let's get this straight. There was no collusion, and in fact, the phony dossier was a con job that was paid for by Crooked Hillary and the DNC. So with 13 angry Democrats were investigating an event that never happened, that was in fact a made-up fraud. I just fought back against something I never knew existed. I knew never existed. Collusion with Russia, so ridiculous, no obstruction. This Russia hoax must never happen to another president. I don't know why. And law enforcement must find out, how did it start? Okay, first of all, as far as the dossier, they've tried to discredit, multiple parts of it and failed. The lascivious parts of it are just unproven, not disproven, and I think they are equating the two quite fully. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Thanks for tuning in on our YouTube stream. We'll be back. Well, on my deck, no yard, kind of nice. 204 watching. That's right. You got 204 people in the chat room. Everybody, hit the like button. Give us a thumbs up right now while you're thinking about it. I'll do my little go. Yeah, I almost forgot. Smash that like. Yeah. So we gotta do our part to try. We gotta grow this thing. This is the first time I'm doing the show where I'm actually recording it as well, so I can post sections of it later on the show. I'm very excited about that idea. There you go. Although MSNBC is one of the stations that cannot be replayed, John Fugelsang's show can be replayed up to 3 days. Okay, that's cool. Oh, I'm getting fancy. You guys have earned it. I mean, that's the thing. Once we started the Patreon thing, I feel like I have a responsibility to make the show even nicer. So piece by piece, I'm trying to improve on that, and thank you guys, and thank you for the super chats as well, because that's that goes to improving some of this stuff. The audio thing at the beginning, I don't know what that was, but obviously it's fixed now, so we're good. In future we will fix. I'll nail that down so that I can do it beforehand. I think what we're going to do...
60 seconds left.
Excellent, thank you. I think what we're going to do in future chat room, for those of you that are here, especially early when we start the show, is I might start a half hour early, just so we're up and running by the showtime without that issue, Thank you, Carrie. I'm working on it. I messed with all the settings last night. I've been watching tutorials on how to make the stream smoother. And then, of course, I started up and there's audio. Sorry, Hal. Can't super chat.
Seconds.
Thank you. I completely understand, Julie. No problem. I appreciate even the thought, you guys. Okay.
I'm Dick Kay from Back on the Beat, and here is the Mega Worldwide Radio program with Hal Sparks.
So apparently, Trump had his big Beverly Hills fundraiser last night, and no celebrities showed up. Too bad. tickets to show up at his fundraiser and be around him started at $15,000 and went as high as $150,000. They aimed to raise $5 million for the party. It was his third visit, and apparently even the celebs that used to come to his events aren't going anymore. So that in and of itself. So I guess people were standing. A reporter from the Daily Beast was standing outside, and literally a valet driving past in a golf cart went, "No celebrities," at the photographers that were waiting outside the place. Like, who are we gonna get a shot of? Will we get to see Gary Sinise up close? I don't know. He was the only Hollywood conservative. Will Dennis Miller be there? I'm kidding. Dennis Miller can't afford to go to that. And by the way, in the last little bit, let's first of all, let's all do a dance about how awesome our field of candidates are across the board. Even warts and all, these folks generally are on message with essentially the same plan. As far as support for a version of Medicare for all, whether or not like Pete Buttigieg or Biden, where they're thinking of a program to ease into it by expanding it over time federally, so that it's not a shock to the system, or kind of trying to pass a bill right out of the gate, which by the way is a lovely notion. But all of the candidates that are supporting Medicare for all, if you support them, you got to turn the Senate blue too, because there is no way it gets through with the Senate in its current configuration. Period. End of story. So as much as you might find if you think for a second that Medicare for all is a laudable goal that needs to happen, you don't even pretend that's going to even come close to happening if you don't vote for whoever the Democratic nominee becomes, because all of them are for it in one form or another, and it's really mostly like I said, a matter of scheduling and functionality, and it won't even matter if the Senate is McConnell's wall, essentially. And that's the problem we ran into in 2018. It will be the problem we run into in 2020. There are some red states that lock in, that despite the fact that they have a population of, a third the city of Los Angeles's population, they have 2 senators. And so those numbers are going to be there. So whatever we can do to make sure that the Senate goes blue, that has to be an integral part of the plan. Period. There's no wavering around this at all, this route. I think if the lesson that can be learned from the Trump administration is that, and I'm curious, chat room, if any of you guys, did you guys see the Vice, there was this Vice, I guess, women who view themselves as feminists versus women who don't, and this kind of back and forth. But one of them was talking about how she voted for Trump. She originally was a Bernie supporter, and then she decided that she was going to vote for Trump kind of as a joke. And she, like, her reasoning was all over the map and was very disappointing, and makes one fear for the future. But it is indicative of a large enough group of people that need to be addressed. There are no joke votes. It is all hands on deck. If you believe in any of the AOC mandate, if you believe in any of the moderate things, allegedly moderate things that Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden focus on, because none of them are against it, they're just it's a matter of how. That doesn't mean anything if you can be talked out of your, voting for a support structure that will go all in for that. And that if you're going to vote independent, or you're going that caucuses with the Democrats, or you're going to vote Green Party or what have you, do us all a favor and vote on the local level. Pay attention to who your judges are. Vote, until such time as a party is able to grassroots itself up to the presidential level through a genuine ubiquity in state houses across the country. The idea that it is amazing to me that these, that the Green Party runs largely presidential and congressional candidates, and ignores mayorships and the like. And the reality is, it's because everybody's trying to cut to the front of the line, and you can't do it. I see the Bernie Sanders thing playing out. I don't know that there's any material difference between any of the programs that he has put forward and Elizabeth Warren, and I can't imagine why any of the people who support Sanders this go around wouldn't simply switch their support to Elizabeth Warren, other than maybe sexism, maybe male over female in those cases. That's harsh. But that's the only reason I can think of it, because, she's technically younger. She has more energy. She's driven. She, helped create and helm the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is one of the most necessary additions to the U.S. government in the last 50 years. A completely ignored aspect of our lives, and she championed it. And I think we all owe her a debt for helping be a part of the construction of that. And that's not even talking about the fact that her policies are on par or better, on, say, something like guns than Bernie's are. So I would say congratulations, Bernie supporters. You have a female Democrat you can back. There you go. So that's there are, over the next, I guess, 6-7 months, we're going to start weeding out some of the ones who are still in low single digits. Biden is far ahead. Sanders is right behind him. When they put all the Gallup polls together, or all the polls together, Harris is right behind them. She's in single digits, according to the chart that I saw most recently. Meaning more than likely that a Biden-Harris ticket has incredible power. And I'm a fan of that idea, 100%. There's a lot of other configurations I'm for. Biden-Buttigieg rolls off the tongue and is kind of fun. There's a lot to that there. So Warren-Harris sounds like it's more of a statement on Harris than Elizabeth Warren. There's Eric Swalwell may be introducing, his candidacy soon, I think aimed in many ways towards a possible vice president position. There's a lot of them that are doing it strictly for that reason, to get their name on the national board. First time around, you run for president and not expecting to win, but expecting to get that name recognition the next time or the next time after that. It's a great plan for some of the younger members of the Senate and Congress and mayors who are running. I'm for it in that regard. Let's see. Vote artery blood blue, no matter who, says Stephen Lee in our chat room. I'm remaining agnostic until the Maryland primary. Well, there you go. That's completely reasonable. Tom, one of our Canadians, loves Warren Buttigieg. And his biggest ice skate uphill is his last name, because everybody's going to look at it and say booty guy and be very confused. Which is fine, which is totally fine. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Parks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Oh, by the way, Trump wants to put Herman Cain on the Fed, and his last Fed chair or Fed board nominee owes $330,000 in back child support and $75,000 in taxes. I'm beginning to think he doesn't think this stuff through. We'll be back.
Hey, Hall, you got three callers now.
Oh, excellent. Okay, who do we have? What's our layout?
Paul from Seattle.
Okay.
We got Morty talking about climate change. Then we got Rudy in California.
Okay, excellent. There you go. Boot edge. I always think of it as Buttigieg. Bernie's wife was investigated by the Muller team early in the investigation. Remember, people question why. Right? Herman Cain, you Becky Stan. Yeah, exactly. That's him. 666. How come? I did not go. I'm here. I was just I was setting up my articles. See.
60 seconds.
Cool. Okay. And on let's see.
Coming to you in 30.
Cool, excellent.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back. So we have some callers on the line. Who do we have there? Who do we got? Who's our first one up?
We got Paul, Morty, and Rudy on the line.
Okay, well let's grab them in order. So Paul from Seattle, I think it is.
Yep.
That's right. Hey, Paul, welcome.
Yeah.
Good to talk to you, man.
So I wanted to make some observations about your playing before the top of the hour, Trump and talking about the wind farms
Yes.
and birds. Okay, so just some observations and some general point. Did he really sound like he gave a flying you-know-what about the birds?
Oh, no. That's something he uses when he's talking about his golf courses. That they, in Scotland there was this thing to put some, they were going to quote ruin the view by putting these offshore wind turbines off near his golf course, and he was like, and then this is one of the things that he and his rich friends sit around the golf course and complain about. You know, that's all this is. Like, somebody mentioned it to him. He doesn't care. Yeah.
Right, and let alone people who have cancer. Because if you, as you alluded to, if you want to talk about damage done to the birds and people getting cancer from fossil fuels, mercury in the air from coal,
right,
which is in every species of bird from the highest mountaintops, that's what they've found. Birds who reside at the highest peaks of mountaintops, there's mercury in their eggs. How about you shoot a bald eagle? Well, let's remind them that the reason the bald eagle was on the endangered species list is because of DDT.
Right.
Was turning their eggs into corroded rubber.
Right.
So then when you say, okay, so the first point is you can count on Trump all through the campaign to just simply make fun of whomever the nominee is. And Elizabeth Warren, when you get to Bernie supporters, a lot of those are they're just like Trump supporters. They're the ones who buy into that, making fun of Hillary, and he's going to do the same thing to Elizabeth Warren, you know, or Bernie Sanders for that matter.
Right.
But
well, I don't think he'll make fun of Bernie, because I think he views Bernie as, if he just kind of leaves him alone, there is some crisscross in you know, kind of like independent libertarian looking people, you know, that kind of waffle back and forth at like that woman I was referencing, who was literally went from Bernie to Trump and was like, and shrugged off the difference between the two of them, which seems like madness to anybody who pays any attention to it. But she's who Trump is talking to when he doesn't go after Bernie hard. He'll dismiss him a little bit, but he wants him to gain ground against the Democrats. He views him as sort of an insider weapon. Right.
And so then just to finish up here, so to argue like pollution with conservatives rather than climate change,
yes,
this is how this one goes. Almost a transcript of a conversation with Michael Medved. He says, well, air quality and water quality have improved vastly over the last 50 years. And I say, not because of Republican policies.
Right.
He says, what? Richard Nixon invented the EPA. Yeah, but every Republican president since then has been trying to dismantle it. So they kind of go back to that, well, you know, Republicans are the ones who freed the slaves. It's the Democrats who were the racists. But they go back into this.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is the entirety of Dinesh D'Souza's career, is arguing that the Dixiecrat shift never happened, right? That the Republicans, that literally Southern Democrats who were so racist they couldn't stand being, you know, the Civil Rights Act, decided to leave and become Republicans and were welcomed into the Republicans because they had already started that shift in opposition and had been at that for a very long time. The same thing applies, you know, like, well, Michael Medved aside, like I will say that at one point he apologized to me, not in public. That was interesting. Because he accused me of being disdainful of the troops, because I was on Good Morning America and he was on as well, and I had an issue with it. There were no Army or infantry or Marines there when we were talking about Iraq. It was all naval people, and I'm like, I'm not downplaying the service that the Navy goes through and the honorable service that all those guys have, but we're not in a ocean war right now, and it don't remove the Navy guys, but bring in some Army guys, because these are the guys who are being shipped over to Iraq right now. This was years ago or whatever. And he accused me of being, you know, dismissive and disdainful and unpatriotic and blah, blah, blah. And then he saw the tape, I guess, and realized if he didn't say something, he'd look like an ass. But he said it to me in person. This idea that, well, we invented it. Yeah, but you invent a lot of things on paper. This is like the Patriot Act, for example. Like, what, you don't like patriotism? Like, okay, you know, we named it the Patriot Act. Yeah, but it was one of the most unpatriotic, un-American pieces of paper, you know, that's ever been put into existence by anybody in the United States anyways. But they couldn't kind of grasp that. Like, they're so busy branding things. I mean, these are the people who believe in freedom, right? If we heard a word during the Bush years more than any other, it was freedom from their side, literally nonstop. but they couldn't wait to stop gay people from getting married because too much freedom. Like that, literally every instance you would see, they would run, what they were running against was freedom playing out in actual human beings' lives. They like the branding name, not the actual thing. So absolutely with you 100%. Let's grab another caller before we get to the end of this break. I want to make sure I can get everybody in. Who do we have next?
Next we have Morty.
Cool. Hey, Morty. Are you there? Can I hear you?
Yeah.
Hey, Morty, go ahead.
It's Marty, M-A-R-T-Y.
Oh, Marty. Okay, thanks. Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
I'm a fan of yours for a long time. I really enjoy your cogent banter.
Thank you.
And it goes all the way back to your sexy liberal days.
Oh, well,
But,
the heyday. We can actually say there was a back in the day part. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, I'm an outdoors person. I fish, I hunt. I have pretty extensive outdoor bona fides. If you
Oh, I will. If I will, I will. Yes. As am I. I don't hunt, but I fish. So I'm with you.
Contact brings me in contact with a lot of people that I just call Reds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I guess that's
you don't mean communist, do you, Sam? Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's interchangeable.
Yep.
At any rate, this demographic that I deal with on frequently is not the kind of people that you get gay political repartees from. It's mostly grousing and complaining and crap like that.
Right.
But occasionally I come across someone that I can actually have a discussion with, and what I ask them is, that for decades the United States has foisted off on the rest of the world products they didn't even know they needed. Okay, we've made millions and billions of dollars and put millions of people to work building stuff to ship around the world that they didn't even know they wanted and could barely afford. And now all of a sudden we have this new craze called wind energy and photovoltaic cells and all this other stuff, and we're not capitalizing on it.
Right.
Okay? We're letting all these suckers out there that are, a ready market get away. How come we're missing?
I agree. Well, there was a Marshall Plan level, support for the fossil fuel industry when it started because it was kind of lined up with the advancement of selling cars, for example. Like America as a manufacturing powerhouse had two big heydays. One was the inventive process, which is, once you're first in, you're 80% of the market, period. And as it grew, but also World War II. Because World War II, in many ways, was one of the greatest acts of corporate welfare in the history of the world, especially for the manufacturing sector, because all of their competition had been bombed to dust. Germany and England and Japan were not producing cars or washing machines or any of that stuff. And the United States was one of the few places where we both had the infrastructure, as far as highways and shipping and boats and all that kind of stuff, and the factories to actually do it. And you're absolutely, I keep reminding people when they talk about, Trump did this weird thing and he thinks it's so funny. He brings it up all the time. This whole honey, I want to watch television. Is the wind blowing? The idea that you only have power when the wind blows kind of idea, which is just goofy. I like to remind people that before we subsidized and carried the weight of the fossil fuel industry, specifically oil and gas, before the U.S. government and other governments started subsidizing and carrying the weight of both getting rid of their wastes and helping them set up stations all across this country, the number one plot point of horror films was running out of gas. It was if you look at the Thriller video, for Christ's sake. It's still part of our national idea of what happens. Your car runs out of gas, because back then gas stations weren't everywhere. They're like Starbucks in 1995. There were like 8 of them. And people would hear about them and drive a long way to get to them. The same thing was true of gas. It just wasn't available, but the government supported the growth of it and supported the infrastructure around it in huge ways. And then when it comes time to shift to sustainable versions of this energy, Obama tries to do a similar thing with solar, for example, which, by the way, worked. It worked. The cost of solar power dropped, immensely over the last 15 years especially, but precipitously during the Obama administration. And the technology around wind is the same way. The reason we're not shipping that stuff out is because of basically this kind of manhood issue that Reaganites have. That Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the top of the White House, and they've been mad about it ever since. And somehow it's just weak compared to gas. That gas is manly, and they have a manhood problem, and solar panels and windmills aren't butch enough for them. It's super weird. I don't get it. But you're absolutely right. This is, why aren't we? And by the way, we are shipping the technology out all over the world, but the way we're doing it is the Chinese are stealing it from us and recreating it and selling it. That's how it's getting into the rest of the world. That's how American inventiveness is hitting the rest of the world right now, and a good portion of European, inventiveness. There are a bunch of angry Austrian and French and British inventors whose stuff is being spread all over the globe for cheap because we won't do it out of pride. It's bizarre. Appreciate the call. We'll be back right after this. We got another caller after the break. 773-763-9278. Barr equals, okay, I'm just jumping into backing up on some of the chat right now. Hal, volume up, please, on the caller. Yeah, I did. I brought it up. It was very quiet. Can you guys send audio a little louder my direction, Chicago? A little bit?
Can do.
Thank you. Hal's drinking moonshine again. This is the darkest moonshine ever. It's just I don't know. I scooped this out of a ditch. It's ditch water. R equals obstruction. Yeah, is you have one job. Just the one. Trump has evidently never heard of a thing called a battery. Yeah, that's the amazing part. Trump thinks you plug your electrical straight into the windmill. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the most extraordinary things about him. And again, some of it, I'm like, I think he has a 1990s view of almost everything technology-wise. How is YouTube keeping 30% of the Super Chats money?
You got 60 seconds.
Thank you. I don't think it's 30%, no. I think it's like 15. But that's why Patreon's better, quite frankly. They cooked us with all that Arctic drought.
30.
Cool.
They say, and this is our new.
Okay, yeah, that's loud.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. It's now time for the happy ending.
So we got one more caller. Let me grab them real quick, and then I have like a little bit more to talk about on Trump's, and sort of and the Republicans' mad need to eliminate regulations. Now, I'm not 100% all in on every regulation that's ever passed. I think some of them can be ridiculous. I obviously think that, the Obama administration made a priority of getting rid of things that were outdated and trying to update regulations so they made sense and they weren't egregious, and it became an issue of like just government overreach for the sake of doing it. But man, like the Trump, wait till I tell you which ones they went after first. And if that doesn't tell you what their priority is for the American people, nothing will. Who do we have? We got one more caller, I think, on the line.
Yeah, we got Rudy over here.
Cool. Hey, Rudy, go ahead.
Hey, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
Good show as always.
Thank you.
I'm doing good, my friend. I wanted to touch on a few of the things you talked about throughout the show today.
Sure.
The dossier, the Steele dossier that the righties always love to blame on Hillary buying. Greg Palast pointed out a couple of years back, a guy named Paul Singer, one of them vulture capitalists, actually was the first one that stepped into that and got that going.
Right.
For Marco Rubio. Now, how it got handed off to Hillary, I don't know.
It went through. It went through the Washington Examiner. They were, I guess, all part of the info gathering on that thing, and then eventually once Trump secured the nomination, they decided to back him, and they sold it to recoup some of their costs. That was it. Yeah.
A lot of people never mention that, obviously, but that was one of those things that was true and obviously was started by them. And when it comes to Mr. Barr and what he did during Iran-Contra, in and amongst all those guys that he pardoned was good old Elliot Abrams, who's the point man in trying to overthrow Venezuela, for lack of a better term, right now. I mean, a convicted criminal, so to speak, is now the point guy in trying to deal with putting that, was it Juan Guaido?
Yeah.
Juan Guaido in place because they, Juan Guaido, he believes in neoliberal economics.
Right.
He was, I do believe, went to school in the United States, but don't we know that natural resource in the ground in Venezuela has been eyed by this nation for such a long period of time, and it just kills me how they...
Well, it's eyed by the way, it's eyed by Russia and China as well. This is, this global fight for fossil fuel is going to get tighter and more angry over time as well, which is even more of a reason to shift to renewables, to get out of that fight entirely, to get that blood off your hands and not feel like it's a zero sum where if I get that resource, you don't, and if you get that resource, I don't. It's bad enough that the people of Venezuela, like the people of Saudi Arabia and Iran and Iraq, and arguably parts of Texas, have had to put up with the fact that some people were born with something under their feet that automatically makes them rich, and that you need from them, and that they can insist on certain behaviors from you to get it. That in and of itself is one of the biggest causes of death over the last 100 years. So yeah,
again, that brings in one of the last things that I haven't heard in years, and all of a sudden over the last 2 or 3 months, everybody's mentioning the Monroe Doctrine. I said, my God, are we going that far back? The Monroe Doctrine was one of the reasons why the people in Central America are migrating this way, because of what we did down there in in the fruit industry in particular. It's like, my God, these guys are nuts bringing up stuff like that.
Well, a lot of them think that this is indicative of our value in the region. That's and ultimately this I put this up like with whenever it comes out, when WikiLeaks releases something that the CIA had a plan for what have you. They had a plan to invade Canada. Okay. Officially, the DOD and the CIA have a plan for everything, in part of justifying their budget and in part for, simply the readiness that military people feel the need to have at all times, especially as from scars of the Cold War. It is not, of course they have a plan. Whether they would carry it out is the question. The same thing is true of, the Monroe Doctrine and the people, in the Trump orbit. Their justification is based entirely on their own personal self-worth. their own belief that they are owed something, you know, in this, and that they have a right to something that isn't theirs. And any piece of paper that will justify that, you know, this is the same thing where, you know, the Bible justifying slavery. It is this, you know, obviously, clearly not the point of the New Testament, but, you know, we can go and kind of hash back and forth, you know, for whatever we need.
Hey, Hal, as always, thanks for the great shows on Saturday morning. I look forward to
I appreciate it.
With all the other ones that I listen to.
I appreciate that very much. We're glad to be here, and I'm proud to do it. And I'm it is always I'm trying not to succumb to too much gratitude about this, but it's like I've over the years I have had moments where I've actually teared up at how great this is. To have this show and the outlet for it and the ability to talk about these things, and it helps to remind people what we're up against. So besides Trump installing Barr to run interference for him in the name of protecting him as a traitor to the United States, and all the while. Making this big show of no collusion, and we're going to build that wall, which isn't being built. He put a plaque on part of Obama's wall, you know, the barrier, the slat fence that was a repair from the one that goes across near Tijuana. All of that pales in comparison to what goes on internally in the soul of Donald Trump, and this is a good indicator. This is Trump speaking at the border.
This is our new statement. The system is full. Can't take you anymore. Whether it's asylum, whether it's anything you want, it's illegal immigration, can't take you anymore.
Okay, so let's, for 1 second, whether it's asylum, whatever you want to call it, illegal immigration, watch how quickly and easily he conflates the two. And it treats the United States like it's his own personal hotel.
It's anything you want. It's illegal immigration. Can't take you anymore. We can't take you. Our country is full. Our area is full. The sector is full. Can't take you anymore. I'm sorry.
The area is full. The sector is full. Like what? Sector? Like he just heard that word from somebody describing an area where they're picking people up.
Can't happen. So turn around. That's the way it is. If you look at our southern border, the number of people and the amount of drugs, human trafficking. The human trafficking is something that nobody used to talk about. I talk about it. It's a terrible thing. It's ancient, and it's never been bigger than it is modern right now, today. All over the world, by the way, not just here, all over the world. Human trafficking, a terrible thing.
Yeah, and I mean, he's really latched onto the human trafficking aspect of things. By the way, don't go Googling the Trump modeling agency. But apparently this has been this is a winning issue for him, because who's not against human trafficking? Of course. But the issue of what they're seeing now, especially when it comes to asylum seekers, some of the people seeking asylum are victims escaping human traffickers. That's why they need asylum, so they don't get trafficked both to the United States and in other countries throughout South America. You're leaving them to wolves. Yeah, but he's the evangelical candidate. What do I know? Thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to go to the post show now. Thank you for all the super chats during the show, you guys, and the support. And thank you for all of our callers calling in. Thank you, Lady B. And we will see you next time. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, every Saturday from 11 to 1 Central Time. Stay tuned for Dick K. Excellent. I mean, honestly, hold on 1 second. Let me start a little clip here. And so, welcome to the post show. Yeah, one of the things I was talking about at the tail end of this is this idea that Trump talks about oh, it's, human trafficking, so horrible, but we can't take asylum seekers, when a good portion of the women and children that are seeking asylum are in danger of being trafficked as humans. That's one of the things that they are escaping. And the other one is the big MS-13. There's these MS-13 people. How many stories do we have to hear about women bringing their sons up to try and get into the United States and get asylum so that they're not co-opted by a gang and become a member of MS-13? Like, it's goofy. The ongoing, there are elements of his argument that if you were smart, you could make, and are made, quite frankly, by both Democrats and Republicans in comprehensive immigration bills. There's a lot of crisscross in actual solutions because it is something that needs to be worked on. But turning it into an emergency and claiming the human trafficking is the reason, and that the country is, quote, full, you have to go home, go back, to people who left the countries they were in for fear of being trafficked illegally, for fleeing that very thing. It's amazing, and part of me goes, it's amazing he can't wrap his head around it. But my concern is that he absolutely can. They know exactly what's going on. They know the contradiction. They just don't care, and they know it works with their constituents, with their base. You can have, and with all this talk about virtue signaling, that the left virtue signals all the time, that we're virtue signaling when we care about, gay rights or trans rights or any of those things. This is, we're pretending this is just virtues. This is showing off that we have virtues. That's what this is with Trump and his care about drugs and human trafficking. Because ultimately he doesn't care. Or the Sacklers would already be in jail, for literally orchestrating the opioid epidemic in the United States. And as and as far as human trafficking goes, like pretending to care about that, while the number of people who are working undocumented at Mar-a-Lago should give you an indication that he doesn't care how people get into the country. He just wants them to leave when he's done with them, like a lot of business owners that work on the border. And in the case of the Mar-a-Lago people, okay, so the issue that happens a lot with, if you want to complain about any kind of human trafficking, the issue that nobody ever kind of addresses is that when somebody is here undocumented, they are at the whim of whomever got them here, got them to that job. And sometimes it's a domestic violence circumstance where the person's mate takes all their check and forces them to work. There have been multiple stories about that in Florida and Texas. Other people are just indentured servants that can't go anywhere. And then there are other people who have to give they go and work at a place like Mar-a-Lago, but then they give their whole paycheck to the coyote, terrible, the coyotes that bring them over, that's holding their passport. Russia, if you're listening, and I love WikiLeaks, is enough proof for me. Well, yeah. So, the Trump's virtue signaling in and of itself is embarrassing. Hal, Joy Reid had a guest on today that said us denying a safe place for those seeking asylum equates to us saying no to the Jews. They're knocking on our door for help, and we say no, go away. I think it's a reasonable equation. And obviously there was an acute direct persecution of the Jews, whereas there is not the people that are people that are seeking asylum come from a variety of different backgrounds, and it's not as distinct. So they do need to be vetted. There need to be judges. That's one of the reasons why the money is better spent on immigration courts and lawyers and the like, as opposed to a wall you can tunnel under. And that's been the argument by most, balanced Republicans and Democrats. It's like, use the money you're supposedly going to throw towards the wall for something that will actually benefit the United States and the people seeking asylum. That functional uses of money, not just showing off that like I built a wall. Now if they climb over it, see. If they climb the wall, that's clearly breaking and entering. That's part of this too. Like the separation of children that Stephen Miller was pushing was using a law that was always on the books that said if you're guilty of a crime, you can't, we can separate you from your children. So this was a way of taking children away from, people who are drug traffickers or may have been trafficking the children themselves. And that conviction or that that process, even as an undocumented immigrant, when you're coming over with a child, just the fact that you're going through that process allows us to separate that child from you until we figure out what the hell is going on, right? So that had been around for a long time. The Trump administration and Jeff Sessions, and specifically, with Trump and Stephen Miller kind of pulling the strings behind this, their idea was, well, just crossing the border is in and of itself a crime. So we can technically separate everybody who crosses. Even though that wasn't the spirit of the law, is not just about somebody who, separating families that cross together. The idea was if somebody is using a child as a shield, or they're planning on selling that child, or if the parent themselves, like in any kind of child protective services circumstance, has a record or is, the child's in a dangerous situation because the person traffics drugs or guns or any other stuff, you could get that child away from them. But they've decided that this applies to anybody who crosses the border. And one of the reasons why they want the wall, I'm convinced, is because it makes it way more distinct to make that case. That if you climb the wall, that's breaking and entering. If you just cross a border, there are areas where, both in the United States and Canada and Mexico, you can cross the border and walk back and not really even know it. Or there's little lines where you're like, hey, look, if I step here, I'm in Canada. If I step here, I'm in the United States. Hilarious. But it's not, you're not getting any of the benefits by putting a foot there. And there are parts of the border where, because of the Rio Grande, or because of, just the way the roads were drawn, that the border of the United States is actually on the other side of a road that goes through Mexico. So technically speaking, you can get in. You're technically on American soil, and so people are going to these points and applying for asylum, right? But the idea is that if there's a wall there, they feel it's easier to make the case that everybody who got in broke a law because they crawled over the wall, or they broke through the wall or went through a tunnel to do it. Did you hear Trump call the wall a no climbing wall? Oh my God. Well, this is a dude who's, where stairs and chairs can be a bit rough. So I would take what he says with a grain of salt about that. But yeah, so I think there's there's a furtherance of their belief system as far as the criminality of crossing into the United States that they feel like is cemented by the wall, or a barrier, a physical barrier. P.S. Also, they kind of, I think when they think of the border, the image that comes to mind is the scene in Israel from World War Z. Fixed fortifications are monuments to the stupidity of man, right? Although the reasons why he was doing that is just basically because they'll fall eventually. Although there's some really nice ones in Puerto Rico if you go down there, like some of the oldest in the West, and they're huge, almost like pyramid-like. I grow weed. What a surprise! I love the weed scene where Shane kills the cartel lady with a croquet mallet. actress was El Chapo's girlfriend in real life. Wow. Old topic regarding regulations. Check our season 2 of the Uncertain Hour podcast. Regulations are the reason peanut butter doesn't kill us. Right, but it's also the lack of those regulations is one of the reasons why it over time the fungus on peanut shells got worse and exacerbated the allergy issue that's happening in the United States. So, and by the way, here's a little chunk for you right now. So, while Trump is always talking about we want clean water, we want the air clean, beautiful skies, this is his push or whatever. Meanwhile, oddly enough, the stuff that he overturns is incredibly curious because some of it doesn't cost anything, technically. I mean, I guess it would. Well, I'll tell you why. So he's overturned, for example, the requirement that oil and gas companies have to report methane emissions leaks. So if they're leaking methane, they don't have to tell anybody. They don't have to report it. Which is, technically speaking, I mean, I guess they avoid paying for it because they didn't have to report it, so they can't be fined for it or forced to clean it up. And then there was a rule that limits the amount, the toxic emissions from. Why is that not opening? Okay. That limits the amount of toxic chemicals that could be released from any kind of industrial facility. So industrial facilities that reduce their ability to emit toxic air pollutants will be exempted from some requirements to control their emissions in a move that Trump administration said will encourage companies to reduce pollution voluntarily. That's right. We can always count on industry to leave the environment better off than they found it. P.S. Hashtag lead paint. The EPA on January 25th issued a memorandum withdrawing the once in, always in policy under the Clean Air Act, which prevents major sources of toxic air pollutants from removing pollution control devices after emissions fall below a certain threshold. Instead, those facilities can now be exempt from those rules. They overturned a proposed rule to reduce air pollutants from sewage treatment plants because, what could be in the air expressed from mountains of fecal material that would concern anyone. And they're in the process of overturning the Clean Power Plant Regulation carbon emissions from power plants, standards for limiting carbon dioxide emissions from new, modified, and reconstructed power plants, emissions rules for power plant startups, shutdowns, and malfunctions. They're literally overturning them. So if you are negligent and your power plant expresses a bunch of toxins into the air because it blew up, shut down, misfired, or while you start it up, it creates a bunch of toxic nonsense in the air. You're just gonna get rid of those rules. Rules to allow methane leaks to go unrepaired during unscheduled or emergency shutdowns at oil and gas facilities, and guidelines that reduce emissions from existing sources. They're going to overturn rules aimed at cutting landfill methane emissions. Air pollution permitting reviews are eased, so it's easier to get a permit about what kind of toxins your site releases into the air. Update a rule that would reduce air pollution in national parks and wilderness areas. Proposed amendments to rules on how refineries monitor pollution in surrounding communities. Anything about reporting and monitoring, they're scrapping right away because it's because the more you know, the more upset people get, and so it's better to, rather than fix the thing, make people ignorant, hide the details. Changes to fuel economy standards for cars and light trucks made between 2020 and 2025, lowering them, of course. Emission standards for trailers and glider kits are going to be scrapped. Suspended waters of the U.S., known as the WOTUS, clarifying which waters are covered by the Clean Water Act. Delayed rule regulating toxic discharges from power plants and public waterways by 2 years. So you can have 2 more years of dumping coal dust into rivers and streams before that rule goes into effect. They couldn't get rid of it entirely, so they punted it. Proposed rule rolling back groundwater protections for certain uranium mines. That's reassuring. They overturned a bunch of rules about certain chemicals. They overturned a proposed ban on chloropyrifos and organophosphate pesticide. Remember that one? That was fun. Narrowed the scope of a federal law requiring safety assessments of potentially toxic chemicals. So don't look so hard at chemicals that are being released. And removed copper filter cake from the hazardous waste list. In the process of overturning 2 programs that limit children's exposure to lead paint. That's fun. And a rule aimed at improving safety facilities at that use hazardous chemicals. They're going to roll that back. And they overturned a proposed rule directing mines to prove they can pay to clean up future pollution. So if you have you can run a mine and take a profit from it forever, and then once you have created a mess too big for you to to pay to clean up, then you just declare bankruptcy and the government does it for you. Super fun site. Federal rules regulating coal ash waste from power plants. States were granted oversight of the waste. Yeah, that's so Virginia and West Virginia can continue to dump it into the rivers and streams of Ohio and Kentucky without ever having to worry about their drinking water. And the people who are downstream from it in Kentucky are the people that Mitch McConnell doesn't listen to. So there you go. I mean, this is their priorities. This is what they think is important. This is the stuff that's going on behind the scenes when everybody's jumping up and down. The progressives are like, Democrats just went after Trump because he beat Hillary and we're still mad about Bernie and blah, blah, blah. And they're still angry about that part of it. So they blind themselves to what Trump is actually doing while he's in office, and pretending that all of it has to do with just Russian collusion and the fact that they're undermining our elections and that they're continuing to do all the stuff that they did in 2016. They're doubling down on a lot of it. We're running more interference. The DOD and the Department of Homeland Security, in spite of what Trump would rather, it seems, are protecting things as best they can. The states are being a little more vigilant about those kind of things. But meanwhile, Trump is behind the scenes just gutting, how much rules that govern how much lead can end up in your food. Because it's it's into profits, and since the entire thing is the economy with him, never mind the secondary costs of the economy, by the way. Never mind the fact that we don't factor in, privatize the profits, and the public picks up the tab for the waste. In the current scheme of things, I'm looking up this one thing on there. The Trump crowd, that's somebody else's problem. This is their version of playing Santa Claus. So brainwash programming works. Yeah, it does. Unleaded water is best. Have they put that governor in jail yet? No, they have not. How in the hell does Mitch McConnell still have a job? Because the Kentucky power structure is really narrow. 104. Yep. Smash that like, folks. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Oh, I forgot to do this. Hi. So post-show, anything goes. I just wanted to pick up that tail end of that story. So we got I'm just going to grab in there, but I just wanted to hear from you guys from the chat room and stuff, what you guys like to talk about, and we will fly some of these things. Republican policies is always about protecting profits and wealth. But in the short term, Julie, because here's the thing. I don't have a problem if your wealth comes from something that's benefited people. I don't have a problem if your profit comes from you adding something to the environment, the circumstance, technology, what have you. It's this short-term stuff where they push to the front of the line, and all the people who are cleaning up their own messes or preparing to clean up their own messes, they got this like weight hung around their neck that they're trying to run carrying 50 pounds because they intend to clean up their mess after they're done or after they're online. And then the organizations like the fossil fuel industries, they don't bother. So that, they're running at a heavy clip. They're not carrying that extra weight of worrying about the environmental impact. And then you add the environmental impact to any of this, they always end up complaining that it eats into profits. You're like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's the actual cost of you being in business. This is what it costs. If we don't pay for your mess, this is, if you want to open an IKEA, run an IKEA. Go, okay, the stuff is cheaper, but you assemble it yourself. We're all good with that if that's what you're telling us. But don't say, oh yeah, your brand new sofa will be delivered tomorrow. I hope you have a sewing machine. You would be out of business in a heartbeat. And that's where the fossil fuel industry has been for a long time. They've acted like, that all the risk and all the fuel, the challenge of doing it was all theirs, which generations ago may have been true, but it certainly isn't true now. Most of these people are just, born on top of it. They must really hate Pence to have not gotten Trump out by now? I don't know. I'd like to talk about the psychological warfare the GOP engages in so people can realize how they are being fooled. Their right to work policy is actually a union-busting scheme. Always has been. I mean, the undermining of unions has been the raison d'etre for a good portion of the Republican Party for decades. And I should know I'm in, I used to be in 3 unions. Now I'm in 2 because 2 of the unions became 1 union. But how Google Sean Casten on Fox News, our junior congressman schools the host on Seeking Asylum is beautiful to hear. It's a short video clip. Would love you to play it in the chat. Okay. I will look it up. Sean Casten. Okay. Let me see. News.
Congressman, also from the state of Illinois.
Okay, so hold on. I'll switch over so you can see this. 1 second. And see if that goes. I gotta. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. It's being weird. Okay. Let's see if I can get this up and running.
Member of the House Financial Services Committee, Sean Casten. Good to see you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll get to Jesse Smollett in a minute. But what the congressman was talking about health care, has the president given Democrats a gift here by now talking about health care and going back to that rather than focusing on making Democrats answer for Medicare for all?
Look, I wish we could talk about this from a policy perspective. The Democrats, in my experience, are not advocating Medicare for all. It's a talking point. There's
a lot of senators who've signed on to the bill, sir.
Let me tell you what matters to me.
Okay.
I've spent 20 years as a chemical engineer and an entrepreneur and a CEO. I provided health care for all my employees. Every single country that has universal health care spends less per capita on health care than we do. The ACA took us
and almost every single country that spends less per capita and has universal health care has terrible results.
That's category.
I've experienced the NHS in the United Kingdom. Their health care results are terrible.
That is simply not true. If you look at the mortality amenable to health care, countries with single-payer systems, which is what you describe with the NHS, have slightly better outcomes and much lower costs. I don't advocate for that personally. Countries
and
that
have huge waiting lines, and they have terrible standards of care, and they've got infection rates out the wazoo.
This is a straw man argument. Countries that have universal health care with multiple providers, like Switzerland, like Germany, they still have universal health care.
Okay.
They have a competitive discipline in their system that keeps it honest. I'm an entrepreneur. I like competition. You can have universal health care with multiple players. Those countries, without exception, are cheaper than our system, slightly more expensive than the NHS models, and have better outcomes than any other country in the world. The ACA was the beginning of a move in that direction. It wasn't complete. We should be protecting it. We should be expanding it to make it truly universal health care, to maintain that competition in the system. And unfortunately, we're playing defense right now in a world where...
When you say we, do you mean Democrats or you mean the United States?
I mean we, the United States, because we are in a point where the executive branch is not defending the laws of the United States, and that has fallen to Congress to defend those laws.
And by this, so you're taking the issue that because the Trump administration is not defending Obamacare, therefore Obamacare is going to fail, therefore it's going to be whose fault?
I don't care about fault. I care about people having access to quality health care. We had in the ACA 20 million more people that had access to health insurance. I can tell you, as an employer who was paying for health insurance, I saw that cost curve begin to bend. It wasn't perfect, but I saw it begin to bend. What we are now doing is allowing the ACA to be whittled away at the end, and the Justice Department is not defending the laws of the United States. This is a first in our history. The Justice Department is not supposed to be partisan. They are supposed to be defending the laws of the United States,
We've had a lot of firsts. Well, the Justice Department is part of the executive branch. They can defend the laws as the president sees fit to do.
By the way, Fox didn't believe that when it came to the Defense of Marriage Act, for example. This isn't the first time a president has not defended a law it saw as unconstitutional. And Fox News was all over Obama for not defending the Defense of Marriage Act, even though the majority of Republicans were against it.
To direct them.
At that point.
We have co-equal branches. The laws are written by all three of us together.
So let's get to this issue of immigration, and now the president threatening to shut down the border.
By the way, this was obviously before, because he backed down entirely.
He's been warned about the economic implications of it. Obviously, this is something that Democrats and Republicans both see as a polarizing issue and a good political issue. You're from a swing district.
Well, no. Nobody sees this as a good polarizing or a good political issue. Both sides, unequivocally, like the majority of Democrats and Republicans, in such a way that you could only say the name Republican or Democrat without going a couple of before it. Those are the only people, everyone was against this. Everyone was like, are you nuts? Closing the border.
You came in as a freshman Democrat here in this blue wave. Do you worry that your fellow Democrats are moving too far to the left?
That's where he goes. So we go straight from the president was going to close the border. It's a very political issue. Do you think the party's moving too far to the left? Like, what the heck do those have to do with each other? By the way, Biden had a great answer when they asked him about
on this.
No, I don't, but I wish we would use a little bit more precise language. My colleague, Mr. Kinzinger, just mentioned, he used the word illegal immigration to talk about the crisis. What we have right now at the border is a surge in asylum seekers. Those people are trying to enter our country legally as asylum seekers.
We also have a surge in people coming across the border illegally and then asking for asylum.
No, we don't.
Which, 6 of none, half a dozen of whatever.
That it is not possible to come across and ask for asylum and be illegal. Now, When you come here seeking asylum, you are not a legal resident until your case has been processed, but you are not entering illegally.
Well, if the second you cross the border, you've committed a crime. Am I correct?
No, you're absolutely incorrect. If you come seeking asylum,
even if you don't cross at a port of entry,
as many of our ancestors did, if you come across and you say, I'm seeking asylum, as many people are right now, you are not a documented resident of the United States until such time as your claim has been processed. So you have a period where you are undocumented, but you are not violating any laws.
All right. Equal time. We had it for Mr. Kinzinger, for you as well, the gentleman from Illinois. Appreciate you being here. Come back anytime.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So as I understand it, aren't you illegal the second I say you are? No. Was that the clip you guys were talking about? What does too far to the left mean? Be specific. Yeah, well, that's interesting, Carl. Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I think when they mean too far to the left, what they are trying to insinuate is that you are playing footsie with communism or Nazi socialism. That's what the too far to the left thing is a way of tarring people who are progressives or liberals with those phrases. It was specifically communism. In the same way that using the phrase alt-right or, moving too far to the right, we associate almost entirely with mentally people picture somewhere between a Ku Klux Klan member and one of the Bundy militia people. Eat a peach. Yeah, a commie pinko. Yeah, I mean, and there are definitely generational issues, of how people picture stuff. But most of the time, that's it. Hal, that was the clip. Thank you for playing it for the chat. Absolutely, Lisa. Glad to. Anyone watching baseball this year? I might go to a game or two. Orkin government and P&W. You should see the numbers of the Republicans in the agencies, even those covered by unions, trying to bring them down while getting all the bends and perks. Yeah, Dem state ledge support. Yeah. Stephanie Rule does that too. Jumps to socialism. American English doesn't define words correctly. Well, and this goes back to, the Democratic Socialists of America exist as a party, right? And their definition of themselves is much more... they've been moving that goalpost themselves a little bit over the last year or so as the phrase has gotten more popular, but they've been loosening what the title actually means. And ultimately, though, the socialism as a function of our daily work life in the United States especially is frankly an impossibility. And that if you're talking about literally like group control of the means of production, which is not the same as, say, Bernie saying like workers as part of a union wanting to control, share in the profits of an organization that they've worked at for a very long time and those kind of things. And in many ways you can say that like retirement packages are an inverted risk factor for the worker. So the idea is that what conservatives would argue is that the reason why you're a salaried worker and why you don't benefit from the profits is because you didn't risk, coming on board, or starting the company. You didn't invest your money. You didn't invest your time. You didn't struggle when it was, as a part of the person who started the business. You just came along and got a job, and you get paid a check no matter what happens. And if the company fails, you might lose your job, but the person who owns the company loses everything. And so your risk is mitigated out over time. The idea being, though, that if you're with the company for such a long time that you are clearly an integral part of its success, that you get a benefits package then, that you would get some sort of severance over time. In many ways, it's a divorce from the company where whatever the stay-at-home parent, who was supportive of the business and took care of the kids, they would get alimony in some ways after they were fired. There's a version that's what your retirement package is in some ways. It sort of plays in the same circles. And so the balancing act of those would be that's left and right. That's the left. The right says the business owner takes on all the risk, creates the business. The person who works there should just get a salary while they work there. And then the worker's viewpoint is, I've worked here long enough and I'm an integral part of the success of this place enough that when I leave, I should continue to get a paycheck or some portion of a paycheck or some investment portfolio aspect of the paycheck after that fact. And so that's kind of the rounding out of, it's a balancing act between the risk and time investment access, if that makes sense. The issue comes when it is when it's either not skilled labor or the workers themselves are easily replaced because it doesn't require much training, or automation replaces them. And that's going to be an argument we have back and forth, and the issue will be at one point that socialism as it stands will eventually end up, if they were running systems like that, where let's say the government took over all means of production of any business. So every, Mylar balloon is made by the government. Every coffee, every Starbucks coffee cup is a government device to carry a government product prepared by a government employee, technically speaking, that once they automate that, then you're getting to a point where I guess every human being who's replaced by automation would have to get your minimum basic income kind of situation, where you just have to start paying people for the jobs they're no longer going to do because their job was socialized, before they lost it, as it were. And there's no finding a new job, or varying into a new one or changing that. Anyways, so the phrase socialism itself, as we understand it, I think is modifying in its vernacular usage, but it hasn't changed in its philosophical point that it's always had. And so the difference in democratic socialism as a political philosophy is that people people would manage their either state to state or business to business would manage their businesses internally to whatever success or failure they would get to. The question is, there's no real answer on what happens if a business succeeds or fails, in that circumstance. In a democratic socialist structure, and this is a legit question, I'm curious what you guys would think about this. In a democratic socialist structure, let's say the government takes over Starbucks. If Starbucks does well after being taken over by the government, then does the government use the funds from Starbucks doing well to pay for the military or teachers and schools and that kind of stuff? And if so, fine. But what happens if it doesn't do well and afterwards it collapses, or that parts of industry disappear because of it? Where do those funds go? What does that happen? At this point right now, and like currently, the government takes taxes from successful business, has a bit of a stake in them being successful, but if they fail, the cost of it doesn't fall on the government, except in the areas of where we've socialized the banks. And and to some degree, the bank bailout is sort of indicative of what it would mean to have a socialist structure to a lot of these things, depending on, the strength and importance of each of these industries, how important they become, like food supply and all that kind of stuff. This is a curious part of it. Untreated wells can give the bodies. That's fun. What are you guys talking about? I'm going to back up. I missed some of your conversation, and it's very peculiar. USA's healthcare is the most expensive. This is true. Largely because of drugs. Big Pharma is a killer. This is true. Especially Purdue. I can't get the post show to play because I have to carry on without my insightful and thought-provoking comments. Oh. That's okay, Nacho Tube. We see you. Fox News Network is a growing boil on the American body politic. I see. Provoke some thoughts. I try. Murdoch is the boil. Amos, let's pop it. Ew. I see. Newsflash. Illegal immigrant gets arrested for stealing jobs. 61 jobs found in basement. Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm talking about the human trafficking aspect of Mar-a-Lago and other places. You know, I was ignoring the houseplanning for a while. That's fine. I'm back to Starbucks. I guess I'm addicted. Okay. They already take money from Starbucks for the military now through taxes. Right, exactly. But the idea is that if you socialize Starbucks so that every cup is poured by a government employee and the means of production around it are centralized under the government, is that for the best? I think if you want an example of successful socialism, look at Tetris. The game Tetris? I don't know of any democratic socialist countries that take over businesses. Where has it happened? Great Britain, Denmark, Israel, where? Well, I don't know that those qualify as democratic socialist countries. And in many ways, I guess they do it with healthcare in some cases, but other industries. Let's see. Here's one. January 17th. Denmark to American leftists. We're not socialists. Democratic socialists have presented Denmark as the elusive nation where socialism has been successful and thus a model for the policies they would implement in the United States. Bernie Sanders regularly invoked Denmark during the 2016 campaign, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reassured 60 Minutes viewers that her version of democratic socialism would veer more towards Denmark than Venezuela. Just weeks ago, a free market think tank in Denmark, the Center for Political Studies, issued a 20-page report telling Americans that 1, Denmark is not a socialist nation, and 2, statist policies have still caused significant economic harm. The 20-page report notes that by some measures, Denmark and the Nordic socialist countries have more economic freedom than the United States do. The Fraser Institute's Economic Freedom of the World Index ranks Denmark 16 out of 162 countries. According to the Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom, Denmark ranked 12th out of 180. It ranks higher than the U.S., which is 18th. Denmark generally ranks high on regulation, protection of private property, fighting corruption, flexibility of the labor market, and trade, but ranks low on taxes and public spending, which are very high in Denmark compared to other countries. The high level of economic freedom is an explanation for the relatively high level of income in Denmark, in spite of the high level of taxes and the big welfare state, the report states. The report authors, Mads Lundby Hansen, Carl Christian Heiberg, and Thomas Du Bostrup showed Denmark following the familiar pattern of its fellow Nordic countries. It became a wealthy country before introducing an ever-expanding welfare state in the post-war era, but after reaching an economic breaking point in the 1970s, successive governments introduced a mixture of reforms, including reduced benefits, partial privatization of pensions, and lower regulation that have restored its economic fortunes. But if Sanders and AOC overstate the extent of Denmark's economic interventions, CEPOS adds, when the White House then the White House understates the economic plan. So there you go. The message from Denmark is clear. Adopting even a soft version of democratic socialism, as proposed by Bernie Sanders and AOC, would make Americans poorer and inhibit their flourishing. That it's undocumented immigrants not illegal because people cannot be illegal. People can do illegal things. People can be constantly, it's like being a felon. And there's a difference between an undocumented immigrant, for example, and I guess, technically people who are here, illegal temp workers who don't bother to go through the visa process. That would be a differentiation, I think. It's not illegal to be a person. No, but it's illegal to be on private property or in another country that you're not a citizen of. I think this is an argument that is a wasted... they can do illegal things, but don't say illegal immigrants. They are not legal migrants, so they are illegally immigrating. This is all jargon. This is not the hill to die on. I would say it, yeah. And I think there's a distinction between undocumented immigrants and people who, say, come across the border to work illegally and go back to Mexico, for example, which would be an illegal immigrant in that regard. I think there's variants of that, and I think DACA, they fall under there. You mean as opposed to passing tax cuts that funnel wealth from workers massively to the owners of production in the states because it just works so well for the vast majority of Americans? Yeah, well, I think those are two mixed things. Those don't overlay Evernum. You can repeal those taxes and you still don't have socialism. You can put socialism in place and you don't have any of the taxation, period. So, in theory, because everybody's being taxed because you are part of the labor force. We don't call the people who hire them illegal employers. We shouldn't call them illegal. See, I think more of a push should be on the employers themselves being referred to as, as criminal, as felonious in what they're doing. Illegal is not the same as undocumented. I agree. Both are committing a crime, but we only dehumanize the powerless group of the vulnerable people. I don't think anybody's saying they're not humans. I just think they think they're here illegally in that regard. But I would argue that I often and sometimes and probably will in the future dehumanize the business owner who would do that to people because they behave in a more primate Darwinian behavior system than like a human being with compassion. Trump called the asylum seekers animals. Yeah, yeah, of course. That's indicative of his mentality. Sounds like a good deal, Ginger. I could use a bit. Until 1986, we used to jail employers that hired undocumented workers. Exactly. We'll just enforce the laws in place, yet ignore that relate to employers who hire undocumented workers. Reagan stopped enforcing them during the 80s. That's exactly right. That's what Pamela was just saying. And that is something that the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill, for example, keeps addressing. The one they keep bringing up that would pass, that never seems to get its vote in both chambers at the same time. A big portion of that addresses E-Verify and fining and jailing employers who are hiring people illegally. ICE busted a business in Texas last week, arrested 288 workers. Didn't hear one word about the employers. Let's see. ICE, Texas, 288 raid. ICE arrested more than 280, biggest workplace immigration raid in a decade. New Jersey-based company that refurbishes and repairs computer tech products as a national receiving center in North Texas. Reed working with heavy metals and recyclable batteries. Our focus is on the criminal investigation. As far as the immigration-related arrest, this is the largest ICE workers. Okay, relatives to workers came to the film. Perez, the daughter of the worker who had been detained, told the station it's not fair. So he said it makes a lot of people really angry and frustrated, right? I said that all those arrested would be interviewed to record any medical, sole caregiver, or other humanitarian situations, right? I'm still looking for where it talks about. In the case with CVE, we received many tips they were hiring illegal aliens and using fraudulent documents. see. So it looks like that the people who run CVE are in trouble as well. And they started an audit of their hiring forms and confirmed, quote, numerous hiring irregularities. So they lied filing their I-9 forms. In this case with CVE, we received many tips. They're hiring illegal aliens who are using fraudulent documents. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to, I think the number was so big, they were, let's see if this says anything about the CVE Technology Group. Oh, that link went to their page. That's funny. Let's see. Federal hiring laws require employers have as I-9 forms. The laws perform necessary and common. They ensure the illegal workers of businesses that knowingly hire undocumented workers, quote, create an atmosphere poised for exploiting an illegal workforce. Berger said, yeah, they also commit a crime. So, yeah. And then there was another one with 159 people that was raided in Sumner, Texas, making double wides and trailers, which is, I mean, ironic beyond measure considering the audience for most double wides and trailers. Most Americans are liberal, even if they don't know it. This article on the American Prospect site has links to many recent polls on various issues. It is a strong argument that people are more liberal than they think they are. Absolutely. You know, I was curious, guys. So, has liberal gotten back to being a good word? It's really fascinating to me that there was a Ali Velshi had this poll that he showed where, you know, that people were referring to themselves as liberals. They used to refer them more, would refer to themselves as moderates, and now more referring to themselves as liberals. And they took it as that the party was moving left. And there's certainly, you know, is an argument to be made for that. But there's also an argument to be made that the word liberal, when they took the poll before, which I think was like 2007, had been dirtied up so successfully by the right that we've now gotten back to the point and where progressive moved in and was sort of picking up the slack, and people were more comfortable being called progressives. And then that ended up being a verbal dead end. And now people are back to being called a liberal. And so I think people are much more, comfortable with that. Yeah. If anything does happen to the employers, I'll be shocked, pay a fine, take it off their taxes, no jail. Right. I think we should start, anybody, if there's I don't know what the threshold would be, but I think 100 employees would be a good one just to start. That if you're busted with 100 employees in spirit of the law, that can be fluctuate, by 10 or 12, depending on the judge. You should have your passport revoked. Guess what? Everybody you hired illegally is being deported, but so are you. Rather than talking about putting up a fence, why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems? Remember that more of us, me included, were bullied verbally using terrible words to describe us. This is why I keep saying stop using the wrong terminology. Make it possible for them to come here illegally with a work permit, and they, while they're working and earning here, they'd pay taxes here. This is true. 45 calls many in society animals, but he thinks that he thinks are against them. Yeah. He also, uses crazed or insane too. It's more of an aspect of his age and when he grew up than almost anything else. When they want to go back, they can cross, open borders both ways, Reagan said it in 1980. Yeah. Well, that was one of the issues with closing, creating barriers in the first place, was that it stopped the regular migration. Depends. Are we embracing it? I don't have a problem with it. I've always liked liberal. But I think it's interesting. The bastard will start a war before they go to jail. Yeah, actually have your citizenship revoked. Yeah. Are we shouting it from the rooftops that it's a good thing? I'm good. Yeah, more labels, ugh. Yeah. Well, and that's sort of a factor of our branding lifestyle now, is that so many people, that your label becomes more important than your humanity, or indicative of your humanity, and therefore an attack on your label is an attack on yourself, and it must be taken personally. And that, for people who are understanding or open-minded about it, you're okay, but that argument will never reach the people who would use language to bully or be hateful. I refuse to let other people define me. I think that's a good idea. I never stop calling myself a liberal. Yeah. Schoolhouse Rock can only do so much. Right, this is true. Exactly. If I let the negative opinions of others affect me, I'd never leave the house. Yeah. Ditto. Everyone here should go watch Rep. Zayapal's speech during the Equality Act hearing, then come back to me and tell me words don't matter. I didn't say words don't matter. Nobody said words don't matter. Let's see.
Oh, wow. You two are going to have such a great trip.
Yeah, have fun.
Hold on. Commercial running for whatever reason.
Retirement.
Well, we'll see. I'm going to bring it up. I agree. Bring back Schoolhouse Rock. It's a good idea.
Voya, helping you to
and through
retirement.
The Equality Act is a landmark civil rights bill to make clear that discrimination against LGBTQIA people has no place in our society. It rectifies an unacceptable situation and sets forth comprehensive protections against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. And it occurred to me that we're talking about fear versus love. We're talking about fear versus freedom. And I didn't intend to say this today, but excuse me. My beautiful, now 22-year-old child told me last year that they were gender nonconforming. And over the last year, I have come to understand from a deeply personal mother's perspective. I've always been a civil rights activist. I've always fought for my constituents and my communities to have equal rights. But from a mother's perspective, I came to understand what their newfound freedom, it is the only way I can describe what has happened to my beautiful child, what their newfound freedom to wear a dress, to rid themselves of some conformist stereotype of who they are, to be able to express who they are at their real core. And since this deeply impactful moment last year, my child, who has always done well in school, but has carried what a mother can only describe as a heavy burden of conflict in their own being that I could not fully identify or help to express, Since this deeply impactful moment last year, my child's embracing of their non-conforming gender identity and all that it has allowed, all that it allows in terms of their creativity, their brilliance, their self-expression, the only thought I wake up with every day is my child is free. My child is free to be who they are. And in that freedom comes a responsibility for us as legislators to protect that freedom, to be who they are, and to legislate, as Dr. Wiley so beautifully said, to legislate our behavior towards all people in our society.
So there you go. Yeah. Oh, be quiet.
Fern.
I don't need an ad.
I'm off the call.
Thank you. Sadly, the DCCC just loves the pragmatic candidate in all of the districts, no matter how liberal-leaning those districts may be. I don't know. They've run some pretty liberal people. There were some great wins during the last run, and they're going to be conservative about it because they want to win. They may be wrong, but it's not because they want to lose, and it's not because they want conservatives in there necessarily, or you know. And it shifts with the times, as it's going to. Notice the use of they and their and them pronouns she is using here. Any comments on the video? Yeah, of course. I didn't. I think that works. There. You want something from the box? There you go. Yeah, a couple of things. One is I think it's a beautiful story, and I think she's absolutely right as far as how we speak to each other. I don't know the context of what she was saying as far as our legislating our behavior towards each other, because I've said this before on a bunch of things, and this has a lot to do with the right's feeling about guns and religion and the like, or being anti-choice, for example, because their belief about abortion rights, for example, are a way of believing that women cannot act morally on their own, and we must legislate their behavior instead of letting it be a social and moral norm that carries the day. They don't trust that, so they want to eliminate a woman's right to choose, for example. And I think the same argument goes for speech and descriptives. Now, I myself, I have no problem with people having, using whatever pronouns they would like, of course, and I use them all the time for people who have them. She's saying that the Equality Act is vital so people can be free to live wherever they want in the country without fear of being refused a job, apartment, and all. I totally agree. But there's a difference between what she's saying about their right to, the rights put forth in there and behavior related stuff. As far as using the words, because there can be protections in there, but that doesn't necessarily have to limit other people's free speech, for example. I think Republicans are freaking when Orange kept spouting about closing the borders. Yeah, absolutely, because it's business. Freedom is suggestive and individualized by the country. My freedom can be contrary to another's, but on that note, her speech was great. I can't get the show to play, just pinwheeling. Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody else having that problem? Her child is lucky because they live in Washington State, but if they lived in Idaho, the opposite would be true. I don't know that's necessarily true. I mean, certainly there are more conservative places than Washington State, absolutely. But that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of people in Washington State who aren't disdainful towards their gender nonconforming children. I mean, arguably outside of Seattle, Seattle is an anomaly, and to some degree maybe Tacoma, but Seattle is an anomaly in Washington State. the reality is that we live in a country built on equality under the law and individual freedom. However, we have failed at in that. And we need constant improvement in that area. There are no laws that protect LGBTQ people in 30 states. Well, does that beyond the federal law protections that they have? Yeah. Sorry, Nacho Tube. Yeah, so in 28 states there are no explicit statewide laws at all protecting people from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity in employment, housing, and public accommodation. That within those states, there are cities that do have it, but they are not statewide under there, which is why federal law is so important. States with non-discrimination laws lacking gender identity protections are Wisconsin. So Wisconsin has LG, I guess just LG laws in that regard. And then some states with, like, Utah has patchwork, apparently. And let's see. Let's look at Idaho, since that was your example. There are currently no explicit, comprehensive statewide non-discrimination policies for gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender people in Idaho. Idahoans continue to band together to work for statewide compensation. This is, by the way, from Freedom for All Americans, which is a group that puts these together. So let's see the most recent thing. House Ways and Means Committee voted 6-1 to hold a hearing on a bill that adds language prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity to the state's Human Rights Act. It had been denied a hearing in each of the preceding 9 years. On January 29th, the House State Affairs Committee voted 13-4 against the bill. But there are municipalities, cities within Idaho, which is the fascinating part, that do support municipalities with LGBTQ non-discrimination in Idaho. These are the cities that actually have. Following municipalities protect people from discrimination on the basis of their sexual orientation and gender identity: Bellevue, Boise, Coeur d'Alene, Driggs, Haley, Idaho Falls, Ketchum, Lewiston, Meridian, Moscow, Pocatello, Sandpoint, and Victor. And that's as of October 9th, 2018. So those are most of the big cities. So statewide, they've had a problem with the conservative bent of the rural areas around it. But all the cities of note all have put in, on a mayor level, protections for LGBTQ people. But by the way, this is why I think federal law needs to be amended, and is why the Equality Act is valuable in that regard, and necessary. LGBT laws, but not laws to protect transgender people. Yeah, that's the point I was making. But the cities in Idaho, for example, all the major cities, Bellevue, Boise, all of them, and there aren't that many because it's a pretty thin state populace-wise, do have LGBT protections in their state, in their city wide municipality rules. I mean, this is all playing footsie with it. This is an example of the public catching on faster than the your kind of standard mid-level aging politician, because those are the people you mostly find in the state houses and governorships. Yes, Pamela, and you should have seen the TERF lesbian Julian Beck and the GOP reps trotted out to speak out against the Equality Act. Fox is a sewer of right-wing propaganda. Yes, and water is wet. All humans should be protected from hate and discrimination, period. Well, yeah, certainly discrimination. Hate is in people's hearts. I don't know that you can legislate hate out of existence. And once you outsource moral growth to a law, it becomes an aspect of whatever, not getting caught as opposed to changing how you feel. That's the heavy lifting of being a liberal. Like I said, there are laws you need to pass to make sure that people, like discrimination laws, so that people are protected and they can go about their lives. And then the rest of the effort after that is convincing, changing hearts and minds. Well, hate crimes are illegal. Yeah. Hate crimes are crimes. The thing that distinctly, makes them and why I believe there should be hate crimes is because, it confers the distinction of that's given to cop killers, for example, onto people who, pick a particular group because of their gender or their race or their religion or what have you, and pick them out basically so that they can, because the idea is that if somebody would kill a cop, they'd kill any cop, and they would also kill any citizen because they're over that line, right? And if they'll indiscriminately kill a cop, they'll indiscriminately kill any cop. So the sentencing is higher for somebody like that. The same thing should be true of anybody who commits a crime based on race, gender, sexual identity, religion, any of those things, because they besides, they're different from a one-to-one murder in that they don't need any extra motivation. And as far as if we're looking at our prisons as a way of saying, okay, you can pay a debt to society and then you can be released, people like that are harder to rehabilitate and have a very specific reason for why they're doing what they do, and would be completely dismissive of the idea is that any member of that group is unsafe walking around if that person is out and about. If two people are in a fight and one of them shoots the other, the rest of humanity is in danger from the one who won that particular fight, and we sentence them accordingly. But if two people are in a fight because one walked up armed to a person because they were a Muslim or a Christian, or they were white or they were black or they were a woman or they were a Sikh or something that made them stand out, then any other person will act as a surrogate for that person, and that person is a danger to a broader aspect of society, and we sentence them accordingly. So we're at destination. Have a good week, all. Well, I'm glad you got there safely, Artemis. TERFs are causing a lot of hate crimes to occur in the UK right now. They are? Like what? Sorry. Fox News Network thinks that all LGBTQ Muslim, liberal, uppity women, and brown immigrants should all be in concentration camps. Well, I don't know concentration camps. I think they think we should be expelled from the country. Yeah, my connection has been solid when playing online. No more issues coming to college. Yep, and they are reporting trans activists on Twitter, so their accounts get suspended. Why would their accounts get suspended? For using the word TERF? Oh, I see. Would they get excluded? Is that one of the... Is TERF not a word you can use on Twitter? Transsexuals were excluded from the women's marches because Louis Farrakhan didn't want them included. Yeah. Let's see. Carrie, if you there's a bunch of people writing about like turf as an offensive word or as an offensive term. So is that what that's in relation to? Follow transcribe on Twitter so you can explain it better. Came late to this discussion. Did you touch on the move in Illinois to have Medicaid cover reassignment surgery? We have not. We didn't cover that. 2 women were leaders of the Women's March, were Farrakhan supporters. Yeah. You guys have been hearing about the term cyclist being a politically incorrect word? No. I don't have enough time to follow everything. I'm just trying to cut things out. The familiar fixture can be applied through the Mac OS file as a terminal function. If I can recall commands, this is, you guys are getting nerded out in a big way. There's a bunch of people in the chat room. QA left, you're totally in House Sparks' chat room, aren't you? I'm in here too. So is Zelchik. Hi, Brian Kinney, FFS, and QAF Laugh. Good to see you guys hanging around the chat room. I would know Carl Leslie, my friend, who works as a Lockheed engineer, used to love Mac OS for the ease of going into the Unix command line. He since switched to Windows, saying the Mac OS is something becoming more opaque. I am Jazz in the latest season of Jazz's gender confirmation surgery. It was really cool that they only give viewers that access. Word Up, my favorite Cameo song. But Emily, check out the CNBC story about the rich New Yorkers. It will blow your mind. Well, you have to send me that link too, Amos. That's not fair. Okay, so let's see. Let me try something real quick. See if I can call this up. I'm gonna find it. Let's see if I can punch it over into here. I gotta find it. Keynote. I want to try something, and I'll be able to hopefully be able to edit this together after the fact. Since the stream is working really well, I might as well just knock this out. I was gonna do a short video on something for you guys, and I thought, hey, why don't I just put I can just, since I'm recording this, I can cut off the bottom of it, and I can actually, let's see, send it to share, airdrop. See if this pop up. There we go. Send it there. There it goes. Oh, look at that. It worked. I just have to bring it up and see if I can open it. Is it sending? think so. Oh, good. Okay, cool. So let me open something up real quick, and I'm gonna... This is just for you guys. I'm gonna throw this in here. You guys that stuck around. I'm gonna take this off because I don't like cancel. Clear that layer. Just put this here. Go to this business. Try this over here. And then, so guys, I'm going to start a video series. And hold on, let me pop out my chat so that I can see this while I'm doing it. And I want to do both of these at the same time. And you guys can help me, you know, with putting this together. And hopefully we'll be able to see each other. Yeah, it's something special. So I was working on this. The reason I had kind of graphics in the show today was because I specifically wanted a, where is it? There it is, desktop presenter. Go to Keynote. There we go. Okay, cool. Let's see if I can make this work. All right, now I gotta change. So I started working on some graphics for the show, and because I was putting together a little keynote presentation for you guys, and I had addressed this a little bit before, in terms of, you know, when I did my birthday thing, when we did birthday goals. Remember, those of you that was around for part of that. So I'm going to, let me see if I can cleanly put this together and do this. Okay, so I got to crop a little bit on something before I show it to you guys. And hopefully it'll work. And if not, I'll just recut it later and it'll be fine. But you guys will get to see the raw, unexpurgated version of everything. So here we go. So this is part of a new series I'm going to call Better and Better. So hold on. See, hopefully this isn't too loud. Hold on. Look at that. Theme music and everything. Hey, everybody, welcome. If you're watching this later, don't forget to like and subscribe. Smash that like. This video kind of dovetails into the one I did around my birthday, about setting your goals on your birthday and having that be your New Year's and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to start a new series of stuff because in my Project 50 struggles, which haven't been that much of a struggle, they've actually been really fun. But I've started looking at how to, you know, like my method of self-improvement and how to get better at all this stuff. And, you know, whether it's you want to get in better shape, get your nutrition together, whether you're learning a new language or a new skill, learning to play guitar, learning to play piano, being better at work so you can get a promotion, all those things where you're seeking to do this stuff. So I put together a little presentation for you guys. And this is sort of step one of Better and Better. And there's a couple of keys. So how do you like that? Huh? Nice? Better and better. That's our goal the whole time. So one of the things that I pushed everybody, you know, on, you know, for a while is like, how do you make your goals sticky? How do you make them, you know, how do you keep at them? Everybody tries to get, you know, motivated and do all that kind of stuff. And so here's the quote. This is it. And some of you may know this, but this is the gist rule 1. Be impatient with your long-term goals and patient with your short-term goals. That it seems like it would be that would be counterintuitive. That would be the exact opposite. That you should just, you know, that, you know, things off in the future, you can't really think about it, and today you just got to chug at stuff. Well, there's a problem with that, in that people get burnout and people get, you know, and when talk about the gym, they get injured, they get fatigued by their own learning cycle, or they overestimate what they can do quickly. And so the most people try for the opposite. Most people do the exact opposite of this. Most people are patient with their long-term goals one of these days, and impatient with their short-term goals. Oh, I got to go to the gym. If I don't get to the gym today and do everything and do my full body workout every single time, or if I don't do cardio today, my life is ruined. And if I miss a day, then I'm wrong, right? I'll never get back on track. And people tend to give up. That's one of the reasons why they give up on these kind of things. So this is the key. So memorize this. This is key. Be impatient. Yeah, Zig Ziglar. Be impatient with your long-term goals and patient with your short-term goals. You got to have a goal if you want to be happy. I love Zig Ziglar so much. So many motivational speakers basically are saying the same thing, and he was the dude who cornered the best way to say it. So here's how, and this is the key to doing this. Okay, so this is how you should establish the goals and how you're how you know you've got a compelling long-term goal and how you have a plan to execute that over time. So here it is. This is the first one. Your long-term goal should get you up in the morning. The reason you wake up is because of your dream, your bigger dream, what you want to occur. This idea, it's so intoxicating, this idea that you can make something like this happen, should be the thing that gets you up in the morning. It should wake you up. But your short-term goals should make you go to bed on time. This is the tough part. Most people will burn themselves out by going through a cycle of really chugging, and then they'll give up after a while if they don't see enough progress. Your short-term goal should make sure that you go to bed on time so you can execute tomorrow properly. And this is true if you're studying, like I said, if you're trying to get your degree. People have this tendency to think that burning the midnight oil is the key to doing it, and then they wear themselves out so that they won't get to the next. By the time, the joke I always say is that the zombie apocalypse is going to happen the day after leg day. That when people they ruin their legs on leg day, and to where they can't barely walk, and for 2 days they're like, oh my God, leg day is brutal. And if anything, if an emergency happens for 2 days after leg day, you're the most useless person in the world. And the reason you work out in the first place should be so that you're slightly more useful, one would think. That should be one of the reasons. That your strength and your health are reliable, for example. And this idea of obliterating yourself 2 days a week where you can't move is sort of absurd. So your long-term goal for, all my physical goals that I'm doing right now, by the way, new personal best, deadlift 325 yesterday, full extra 10 pounds over that. That was amazing. I wasn't planning on doing it, but this kid at the gym that I see when I'm there talked me into it. And I was like, all right, I'll slap the couple of 25s on there and see what happens. So the point is that because you want this bigger dream, because you have a vision of what you want your life to become, that's why you go to bed on time every day. That's why you structure so you'll be your best during the cycle of study, of practice, of work, so that you're not exhausted, so you eat more sugar and crap, that kind of thing. Okay? So it's super clear. Let's do that again. Your long-term goal should get you up in the morning. It should be that motivating. Your short-term goal should make you go to bed on time. Okay. So, and then let's see if we can, let's see if I can try to do this, whatever. I don't want to throw this up. Okay. All right. So the first rule of this, where you put this into action is do today what must be done. Whatever you can do today that you're supposed to get done, get it done. Set yourself a plan for today, not tomorrow's stuff, but today's stuff. Execute a daily strategy for this. This is one of the second rule in this is one of the things that when I work out, I really push. This is really important to me, which is avoid pain, fatigue, or exhaustion. This seems counterintuitive when you hear all the people who talk about exercise, especially like, or burning the midnight oil working on a project or something like that. They wear themselves out, and then they wonder why they have an aversion to doing the task later. You are writing code into your system with everything you do. So if you hurt yourself every time you go to the gym, eventually your body's going to be tired of going to the gym. It's going to be, we will do more to avoid pain than we will do to gain pleasure. So when you're, set the limitations on the amount of work and the amount that you can do daily just below the threshold of pain. You should push it against it. You should definitely, your struggle window is much higher than you think it is. But you should stay below the pain, fatigue, or exhaustion threshold always, because you don't want to write any code into your system that says, I don't like this and I don't want to do this anymore, especially if it's something that's a goal and it's your favorite thing. People can turn themselves, that's what being bitter about your art is all about. So, okay, avoid pain, fatigue, or exhaustion, unless that excites you. And that is the caveat that I would say. If you are turned on by the fact that you're like, oh my God, I'm so sore, this is awesome. If you're that type, then fine. But obviously, that has a limit to it too. Okay, the other thing is practice 1% improvement. Every day, whatever you're doing, try to make it 1% better. 1%. And those of you that have watched me over the course of doing the radio show and putting my system together and all that stuff, especially over the last 6 months, you've probably noticed that incrementally I am adding levels of difficulty and technology and extra stuff to the process of doing the show. For you guys, so that it's more fun to watch and it's more informative, and it has, it's just the quality standard goes up. But not doing it all at once and tearing time away from the rest of my life, getting myself forcefully unbalanced, right? So that process is, the reason you do 1% improvement is because you're building something to last. You want to build something, structurally that is sound, and you only do that by doing each brick properly. And by the way, Ellie in our chat room is saying my short-term goal is nocturnal, so interesting challenge for me. Well, if your goal is nocturnal, then your sleep schedule can be during the day. That's not the important thing. The important thing is setting yourself up to win by making sure that you're taking care of yourself in that regard. So, and then the last one is every rung on a ladder is equally valuable, and including, on. I'm going to go with on. Every rung on a ladder is equally valuable. See, 1%. I fixed that right there. Fix that little 1% thing. Every rung on a ladder is valuable. Just the top rung feels great, but the middle ones are equally as important, and you climb them steadily. Super important. So there you go. So that's in terms of what I call the GIST system, get your shit together. In terms of getting your shit together, people tend to do it in bursts and then not at all. And I've been guilty of that in the past, and it's something that I'm trying to fix. And this is how I'm going about fixing it. So quick review. Be impatient with your long-term goals and patient with your short-term goals. Your long-term goals should get you up in the morning. Your short-term goals should make you go to bed on time. Do today what must be done. Execute a daily strategy. Avoid pain, fatigue, or exhaustion unless you really like it. Practice 1% improvement. Remember, you're building something to last. And every rung on a ladder is equally valuable. And this is one of the most important things. And this is, I'm almost dedicating this to Ginger because of some of the stuff we talked about. There are no setbacks. There are only stress tests. Let me state that strong. There are no setbacks. There are only stress tests. The entire purpose of every challenge that is put to every plan that you have is not to destroy it or push it or ruin it or scuttle it. It is to make sure it's a sound plan and sound that engages in sound action. There are no setbacks, only stress tests. This is just the world stress testing your plan. So there you go. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you guys very much. Leave a comment if this helped, if this worked for you. And let me know if you want to see me cover any particular area in Better and Better, be it learning a language or a new skill, or studying, playing a musical instrument, learn to ride a motorcycle, working out at the gym, nutrition, any of that stuff, because that all falls under this. And what I'm really looking forward to is incremental change that lasts, incremental advancement that lasts. So there you go. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. I'm Hal Sparks, and you've watched Better and Better. What do you think, guys? Is it pretty solid? Was that all right? What do you think, guys? Is that all right? That little piece right there? Is that functional? Did that help? My goal is getting into real estate. Okay. Take a class, watch on YouTube. There are tons of YouTube videos on starting with real estate. It's difficult not to be impatient with the short-term goal of finding a job for obvious reasons, but I am trying every day to stay calm and measured about it. Well, your short-term, your long-term goal is to have a career that feeds you and both physically and spiritually. The short-term goal is looking for that job. And believe me, I know my jobs disappear every week. I lose a show every 7 years minimum, and I'm always looking for new stand-up shows, and then as soon as I'm done with that, it's gone forever. That's just how it is. So I hope that makes sense. There we go. Walking is my great exercise. Plus a stationary bicycle at home. That's nice. Well, thanks, Zelda Chick. Your best is perfect. So I recently decided to pick up my guitar after 40 years. So there you go. So there's a really good example, Lisa, of developing the calluses on your fingers is a long-term process. It's a gradual process, and doing scales and chord progressions, like jumping back and forth between chord positions, for example, I'll show you 1 second. This is good. We'll do a little example class. Why not? Hold on. I'm going to switch to the other camera because that's just weird. I don't know why. Hold on. I want to grab this guy. Hold on. I'm not going to plug this guy in. It's a semi-acoustic. So when you are looking to develop a skill, for example, there's a lot of people who, if they were going to go learn guitar, for example, they're like, I can't do it. First of all, I'm going to throw up the beginning of this, and maybe I'll get a second video out of this just because I'm going to be, so watch this. Since I'm recording these things anyways, why the heck not? You know what I'm saying? Slide this forward a little bit. So, in the case of learning an instrument, okay, so Better and Better. Welcome to Better and Better. That's stupid. So, when you're learning an instrument, for example, most people immediately go to, I couldn't do it. I could never. I sat down. I tried piano for a little while, but it was too hard. Some people are just blah, blah, blah. Okay, first of all, anytime you are amazed by a person who is a virtuoso, you are rude to the process they put in. You are dismissive of the work that they put into actually doing it. Okay, never ever go. It's like it is the moral equivalent, as far as I'm concerned, of standing next to someone in a wheelchair saying, "I could never learn to dance. I'm just not. I just couldn't do it. Yeah, I'm just not good at it." If you want to, do it, because you have functional legs, and don't be a dick. So the same thing kind of applies to a musical instrument. The first thing I learned to play on guitar was, where was it? Something like that. No, and I turned it into Metallica. It was I don't remember it now, but it was the A-Team theme. That kind of thing, right? So, in doing that, you know, something like that. Something like that. Anyways, point was, it was bar chords. It was super simple. It's 2 fingers. Right? So that was the first thing, right? Because the chords, like, that's a D, right? But that's a D too. And that's way easier, and then I could start playing. And then you get excited about it much faster. And there has to be something in it that excites you, that makes you do it long term. Like, so set a song that you want to learn long term. I would love to be able to play this song very well, like at a drop, you know, and if that's your thing. And then eventually, and this is hard to like, there's no camera on this, so whatever. One of the things you could do is like, okay, today I'm just going to practice going from the D chord to the G chord. That kind of thing. That's what you're doing today. That's it. Right? Nothing else. Just that transition. Right? Because you're not teaching yourself how to play a song or doing those things. You're teaching yourself how to transition between things, and that you can do it. And so repeating it ad nauseum until you're just annoyed almost. That's today. That kind of thing, right? And then like one of the things I did early on was I Remember You by Skid Row. Right, goes back and forth between that version of G and that version of C. So I just practiced that little piece going back and forth, because there's dozens of songs that go back and forth between those two things. So just get that, you know, get that part down. That's all today is about. And build up to where your fingers are getting a little bit sore, not just short of it, and then put the damn thing down. And then get back at it the next day or the day after. Let's say you're going to practice every other day because you have other stuff going on. So the point is, you're setting a goal for yourself, a long-term goal that you're impatient about, but you're only going to be able to do this big goal. This, like, you want to play, you know, More Than a Feeling by Boston, for example. Like, you want to learn to play that whole thing, solo and all, and you want to play guitar. Then you need to break it down into pieces and learn those pieces on a daily basis until you're annoyingly capable of each of those little pieces. And then eventually you'll be able to, before you know it, you'll be able to attach it all together. And any tricky parts, you go, okay, just this one little riff just drives me crazy. Like, I've had several situations where I've had one particular thing that my fingers just don't want to do. So that's all I focused on for a whole day. And then if I wasn't able to get it, take a break the next day or the day after, go back and do it again. And there's a couple of times, like, I couldn't, here's an example, I couldn't play and sing at the same time. I used to not be capable of doing that. And my buddy Rob wanted us to do a show, and I was like, dude, you don't understand. I'm going to have to hire a guitar player and teach him how to play my parts because I can't sing and play, and I want to sing, and I don't know what to do. And he's like, no, I'll just book a rehearsal space. We'll do it on Monday. And I'm like, but you don't understand. I can't sing and play. I don't know how to do it. And so I, out of nervousness, and I freaked out all weekend. I sat down with my songs, and I practiced them like Friday, Saturday. I went to bed Sunday night. I couldn't sing and play. Like, it was totally bizarre. Still couldn't do it. And then I woke up Monday morning and I could, because my body was just tired of trying or something. And it made all the difference in the world, you know, that it was just a matter of like practicing and getting over that. Isn't there an A minor D progression in Guns N' Roses song? Can't remember. It's been a while. Patience, maybe? Justifiable. But the point is, if you break these things down, if you, whatever it is, into digestible chunks, and you don't go beyond your limit, which will grow, by the way, what you can put up with. Like, maybe you're thinking about working out. Maybe you just need to start out by walking around the block. And then, or going to a pool and working out in a pool, like people who have been morbidly obese or whatever, like sometimes they can do damage to their knees and joints if they start running and doing other stuff right away. So it's better for them to work out in water, for example, and not for very long. But you should stop just shy of pain always when you're trying to grow a skill. That I will say that unequivocally. Like I said, unless you feed off that pain, which is very rare. And it's usually people who don't need that much, right? So Ginger's saying, I'm not so good at the stopping. I'm kind of obsessive, in case that wasn't clear. Yes. Well, sometimes, Ginger, what will happen is, like, you go, I need to prep for my book, and then I will just write until it's done. And that's your system, and that's okay. The prep time that you would put together is between this book and the next one, so that the next book is better because you gave yourself more room to do the things that you need, that kind of stuff. But also, how can I write a book in a month? Who needs sleep? That's how I can write a book in a month. Who needs sleep? Right. Well, that works for you because that's within your pain threshold. It's not within the pain threshold of somebody who's just starting, for example. And so you have to ease into it, and everything should be just shy of your pain threshold. That's the important thing. Like, whatever you can put up with, you should put up with, up to the point where if I go any further than this is going to be painful tomorrow, and stop there. And because, like, going to the gym, like all the workout stuff that I've been doing, the major progress that I have seen, the huge shift that I've seen in my physical person, and this has been a big deal, is largely because I kept going to the gym, and when I would go, I would push myself to the absolute limit, but within this threaded window of I would not go over it to where I harmed myself or under where it didn't actually benefit me. So it was hard enough to be truly challenging, but never harder than I can stand to go back to my normal life daily. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's different if you're getting ready for a fitness meet, or you're getting ready for the Mr. Universe thing, and that's 100% the dive in. That would be the equivalent of Ginger writing a book in a month. And some people they're professionals at this. And I think that's one of the things that professionals miss about this whole thing. That a lot of times you can learn a lot from a professional, but you can also learn a lot from other amateurs who are getting down the road a little faster than you. So chipping away at this idea of starting with the rock, breaking off the rough edges, then smoothing it down, then measuring it, then making sure it fits, and then doing the next one. That daily exercise around whatever you're doing, it makes all the difference in the world. And the best thing is you won't give up on it. And this is true of nutrition and diet. That's why I'm not big on cutting sugar, 100%, for example, because you can't do it. And you can't do it because if you eat bread or you have, any number of things that you're like, I didn't know that had bread in it. Of course it has bread in it. I mean, I didn't know that had sugar in it. Of course bread has sugar in it. And you're like, I can't cut sugar 100%, so why even try? People end up backing out of those things more often than not. So what I say is cut it 60%. That's a number you can wrap your head around. It's beyond 50. It's a majority, but it's also allows quite a lot of wiggle room for getting it right. And what you'll find is if you give yourself that window of 60%, you'll more than often do 80-90%. More often than not, you will do 80 to 90% of the work. It's amazing how the mind works. If you give yourself, like the rules and the push to do something, but you go, I've got enough. This is challenging, and I'm going to make progress, but I'm not going to wear myself thin. So that's the window. There you go. I can do the Stephen King method of writing a set amount every day. It frustrates me. I can't set time aside and commit to it. Yeah, well, that may not be your methodology, but again, that's within your pain structure, and that's awesome. But what you can do with, the set amount of time a day or whatever is, and you don't even have to make it a time thing, brainstorm your next book or some other idea and let it gestate in your mind. Set up those things. How can you improve your writing? Maybe it's just reading other stuff to widen, your natural vocabulary, because people who read more have a broader vocabulary than people who don't. And so if you read outside your normal circle of vocabulary, you can allow yourself, you put more tools in your toolbox in that regard. Bad timing, just opened a ginger ale soda. Well, that's fine. That's not bad timing, P. Grant. Just don't open the other two, or whatever. Let's see. And I want to make sure you go through there. Hear that, Carl, not easy at all, still trying to walk normally after a mild stroke just before Thanksgiving last year. Well, we wish you a speedier than normal recovery, Charleston, considering that. I had to learn the kind of backtracking years ago. I went from going 10-mile runs to being a chemo to learning how to put weight on my feet again so I could walk. Yeah. Well, it's, that, and I think that's, Carl, why you have your wisdom about you. Oh my God, I have to go. Have a good weekend, folks. Yeah, I got to run as well because I have to install a dryer. And that's going to be an adventure. Our dryer died, so my 1% is getting the dryer back and operating today. I think I can do it. So anyways, you guys are awesome. Thank you for letting me experiment with this stuff on you. Going forward, I'm going to do a bunch of these better and betters. So like and give it a thumbs up, give us a comment, ask us if there's anything you want to cover. Because there's so many areas where, as I have sort of fixed on, I've fixed on a method as much as I fixed on the goal and its attainment. So I'm super excited about the idea that I can do more of these and teach you kind of like strategies for actually making this stuff come true. Because can I brag for 1 second? I watch a lot of these motivational speakers, and I watch their backstories, and so many of them, and ones I like, Les Brown, Tony Robbins, most of them started doing promotional, motivational speaking before they were even a success, which I don't know how you can get away with that, but sure. Meanwhile, I personally have had success in 3 careers so far with a 98% fail rate. Acting, directing, and stand-up. 98% fail rate. Really successful in all 3. Thanks. Am I at the top of my game? No, because that's my long-term goal. And I'm steadily walking towards it all the time. But that methodology of steadily walking towards it and knowing that there are no setbacks, only stress tests, and that idea, I've always had that with me. I've always benefited from that mentality. And from that, I wanted to pass that along, at least from a point of view of actually knowing what I'm talking about, as opposed to just selling something that, which I see a bunch of people selling motivational stuff, and I'm like, you haven't done anything yet. There's a ton of those dudes. That's the old dictum of baseball hitters failing most of the time. Yeah, absolutely. I know Tony Robbins worked for Jim Rohn when he started. Yep. But he was nearly broke when he was doing most of his speeches. Like, listen to his early stuff. It's terrific. I mean, it's very, it's very reassuring. That nobody starts midway up the ladder. Nobody. And those that do are usually in the process of falling off. So you guys are awesome. Thanks so much. I will see you again next time. And hopefully, piece by piece, the show will get better and better. All right. Take care. Bye.